Everybody here ready to go? All right, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Would all who wish join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all.
Have one proposed agenda adjustment to add item 8A2. So under hires, food service delivery driver. We'll hear more about the details, but anybody have other agenda adjustments, or I'll make that as a motion. I'll go ahead and make a motion to add item 8A2, food service delivery driver, to the agenda. Is there a second? And any discussion? All those in favor? We have to do roll call. So Aaron?
Aye.
Jake? Leo?
Aye.
Mark? I
Aye.
also vote aye. So the agenda is adjusted. Next up, we have minutes. We're catching up with the summer. We had a lot of meetings this summer, so a lot of work for Rachel. So the first set of minutes is for August 18th. I would make a motion to approve the minutes for August 18th as presented. Is there a second? Is there any discussion? I think we'll go ahead and vote. Leo may or may not make it back in time, but unless it's a close vote, we'll just go ahead. Aaron, how do you vote? Jake?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. And here comes Leo. We're voting on the minutes for August 4th. Do you want to vote on that?
Yes. Aye.
Okay, so that's unanimous. Next up, we have the minutes for August 24th. I would make a motion to adopt the minutes for August 24th as presented. Is there a second? Any discussion? Roll call. Aaron?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Leo?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Minutes for August 27th. I had one correction. Looks like we voted on soccer 4 times, but we actually voted on soccer twice, and the last 2 were votes on football. So I would make a motion to approve the minutes for August 27th as presented, with the second 2 votes on the last 2 votes in sports being for football rather than soccer. Is there a second?
I second.
Any other discussion or corrections?
There's one other correction under 6B2F. Aaron is listed as Aaron Eckert instead of Aaron Ellis.
Okay, we should fix that too.
Jake is like my brother, but he's not.
Different mothers.
All right, so we have 2 corrections, but there's a motion to adopt the minutes with those corrections. Any other discussion or corrections? All right, we'll take a roll call. Aaron?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Leo?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. And I have to get back to the agenda. So we have minutes for September 8th. I would make a motion to adopt the minutes for September 8th as presented. Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion or corrections? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to a vote. Aaron?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Leo?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. All right, gets us pretty much caught up with minutes. Thank you, Rachel. I know that's a lot of work to sit there and watch, having to watch the school board meeting not just once, but twice, so we appreciate that. Warrants. I would make a motion to approve warrants payroll 7, main purse for September, regular warrant 7, bond warrant 22, and ban warrant for 2020. Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion discussion or questions? All right, we'll go ahead and vote.
Aye.
Aaron? Jake?
Aye.
Leo?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Next, we come to public comment. I don't know how many people are planning to speak, so I'm going to, for the moment, we have about, we can probably, it's a long meeting, but we can certainly afford a good 10 or 15 minutes for public comment. I'm just going to start, assuming people are going to be brief and to the point, and that we're not going to fill up that time. But if we get close to that time, I'll have to start putting time limits on. But hopefully we won't get there. Is there any public comment? Just go ahead and unmute your mic and jump in if you'd like to make a public comment.
I would just like to mention, as you guys consider bringing back more students, that I hope our district isn't planning on compromising on the safety standards we currently have in place. Because right now I know some of the things we are doing is more stringent than the minimum guidelines. And I feel like ultimately that is what is going to keep our school a safe place, a place where COVID won't spread, and also a place where parents and students can have peace of mind. So I just hope we're gonna not have to back down on some of the choices we've already made as you discuss that. And I see you already have this in your agenda, but to me, another concern that needs to be addressed with that is transportation. Having twice as many students, can you fit them on the bus? Because I think as winter comes in, it's going to become more difficult. Less people are gonna be walking and biking, and even difficult for parents as far as snowy bad weather days for driving. So I think that's a real concern that you guys need to consider. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Hi, this is Deb White. And I want to speak again to the beginning to add more students back in. And just like at the beginning, we moved slowly before we could run. You have to walk before you can run. I think we need to jog a little bit before we move into an all-out marathon or run. And it's time to think about it. But I'd also like it to make sense for the timing. And when the marking period changes November 2nd, which really isn't that far away for the middle school and high school, that would be an optimal time to either add students in or add students out, depending upon which way we made it, because it makes most sense in terms of teacher load. Because if we brought 7th graders back, for example, I would have to combine 6, I would have to redo my Google Classrooms and my organization from 6 classrooms to 3, and it would involve a lot of prep time, and to have those 3 weeks to get ready for it would make a whole lot of sense and be really appreciated by teachers. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Yeah, I'll say something just very briefly. First of all, I wanted to thank Superintendent Higgins. I wrote her a note a few weeks ago when as we bike home from school from Mesa Adams, we noticed the athletic fields, and there were a lot of kids without masks all sitting next to each other on the sidelines. She responded to my inquiry about that. As we've continued to ride our bikes home from school, I've noticed that there's still a lot of athletic activity happening with kids not wearing masks, definitely closer than 6 feet to each other. And so my question was, what is the existing procedure for accountability for all of our rules? What is the chain of accountability, and what's being done to make sure that the rules are being enforced? Because I think, especially if we're looking at lightening some restrictions and increasing students in the school, it's one thing to have the rules down on paper, and it's another thing to have them, to know that they're being enforced as someone who's sending their child to school, and also someone who lives just in the community in general. So that's my question for the board, or anyone who knows that.
Okay, thank you. I try and keep it in a comment period now, but I'll see if I can answer that question a little later on in the meeting. Is there any other public comment?
This is Malcolm Himshoot, a parent of middle school kids. I favor the cautious approach that we've got so far. I'm interested to see the survey results that you all did, but really from a public health standpoint, no bad news is really good news. And so we've done well, and I want to see us continue in that direction and not change the hybrid schedule, even change without a lot of stress. So thanks for being prudent and cautious.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment?
Yeah, hi. This is Pete Howarth here. I'm a parent of 3 children in RNO schools in the middle school and high school. I'm also a retired aerospace engineer. I was responsible for flight critical safety systems, and like many people in our community, I was directly responsible for public safety. I was trained to respect the value of standards that keep us safe, but more importantly, to be watchful for any situation where we gradually develop a tolerance for risk and then lower our guard. So it concerns me greatly when I see the survey come out with a sentence that begins, given the successful start of the school year and the stable conditions in our community. I think this misrepresents our situation. RNO school safeguards haven't been tested yet. We've not yet had a case at our schools, so we cannot really say that the safety measures in place today have worked. It's like taking a shingle off your roof every day in the summer and then claiming success because your roof still works. You only know the roof works when you get a rainstorm. So I expect our minimum safeguards today are higher than the state standards because our staff and administration spent all summer preparing them and they did a great job. However, in the last couple of weeks, we're seeing that main schools are getting cases. In Lewiston on the 24th of September, there was a case. Waterborough on the 25th of September, Camden on the 27th of September, Redfield on the 28th, and just last week in Brewer, there was also a case affecting that school. Our successes to date in Orono are really because our community has not seen many cases. But as we see with the tragic wedding event, our cases are low, but they can quickly spike. RSU 26 can't predict when we will have cases or when a contagious person will come to the schools, but we need our safeguards to be in place when that does happen. So I just want to be clear here that I like what we've put in place so far, but we really don't know how well it's working. And only time will tell on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Give it one more second for public comment. All right, seeing no more public comment, we'll go on. And by the way, thank you everybody. That were good, strong statements and also to the point. So very timely, I appreciate that. The one question about accountability, I'll just quickly point out that we have a policy. It's a somewhat oddly named policy. It's board communications with staff, but it's basically, it's what everybody would expect. Complain to somebody locally, an adult that you see present, and if that's not working, complain to a principal. If that's not working, complain to the superintendent. And if that's not working, complain to the board. But as you might expect, it's pretty rare that things reach that last stage. But that's if you have a concern, please do bring them up in that fashion. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to the next agenda item, which is acknowledgments. So there's a $50 anonymous donation to the Orono Middle School Cross Country, which we greatly appreciate. It's below the threshold requiring board approval, but we do want to publicly acknowledge that. And other acknowledgements. Do you want to start, Aaron?
I don't have any direct acknowledgements tonight. I mean, just everybody is doing a great job just holding tight and getting through this.
Jake? Nothing at this time.
Leo?
Yeah, I have a couple. I want to acknowledge Mike Archer, the athletic director, and all of the fall coaches that have been responsible for getting the kids playing sports, and also Cammie Carter, Daniel, and I don't know Daniel's last name, and John Holly, who have also been able to get our students working on the fall musical. I don't know if there are other extra co-curricular stuff that I'm just not seeing. These are the ones I see. but if there are, I would also want to commend them, those that have brought the plans forward and are moving these initiatives for our students. I think, it's a huge percentage of our students, and I think it's critical for their mental health. So I'd like to thank all involved that are making that happen. And I also want to acknowledge, I think from what I'm hearing locally again, that Orono is setting the bar for hybrid from a synchronous perspective. So that's a thank you to all of our staff that are making that happen. I'm hearing kind of similar stories that I heard over the spring. That said, I still don't believe there's a comparison academically for remote, but I believe 100% that we're setting the bar, and our staff is bending over backwards and doing an amazing job. So I want to commend them all for that, staff and admin.
Great, thanks. Mark?
I would just like to second Leo's first acknowledgement for all of our co and extracurricular activities that are going on, those responsible for moving those forward. Much appreciated. So far so good, and keep up the good work on that. So thank you.
And let's see, I'd like to second, I guess the other half of Leo's acknowledgement, just, and Aaron said this too, a great gratitude to our teachers. I know this is not an open the doors and we're over the hump kind of thing. This is a marathon, and we're still got a long ways to go, of course, but people are still working hard, very, very, very hard. I know it's been lots of stress and challenges. Teaching today at the university, I had another technology glitch, so it's surprise du jour with teaching in this mode. So I really appreciate everybody working so hard, and as Leo said, setting the bar so high. On the safety front, on the educational delivery front, I think we're really setting the standards, so I appreciate that. Also, just, I think I've said this once before, but really want to acknowledge the administrators, principals, Lisa, Meredith Diamond as she came aboard, the superintendent who worked all summer. I know, of course, that they're paid to work over the summer, but normally things quiet down over the summer, and things just got crazy. And so they all started this marathon not in August, but really back in March, and have had almost literally no break. And so I was just reflecting the other day, I was talking to Brent actually about how many hours he saw people working, and I just wanted to acknowledge that an incredible, we're clearing this bar, of course, because of the wonderful staff, but also because an incredible amount of planning went in over this summer, which was an incredible amount of work, and I appreciate that. Meredith, any acknowledgements you have? I think you're muted.
You hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. I was going to mention what Leo and Mark said, and indeed we do have many co-curricular, clubs, class activities, student councils up and going. So people are finding a way to offer that important programming to students in different ways, but meaningful ways. We often see the ones that are most visible outdoors, but there's a lot happening with student groups. And so acknowledging all of the creative thinking that is going into that for our students to have those opportunities. Much has happened in the past month since we met. We often in the fall we skip a meeting, and I think it was a month where we were kind of still getting the airplane off the ground. But we did some firsts, in a new way, like we held fire drills, and we had picture day in COVID land here. So just want to thank staff for figuring out all those different little nuances that we have in schools and making those things happen. Particularly around fire drills, just the town has been great to work with. They made an instructional video so we could do some instruction with students before we had the drills, particularly, students who are new to the district or younger students. So, everyone's really pitching in to find ways to make, schools operate the way we need to operate for everyone's safety. So just want to acknowledge that.
Thank you. Any acknowledgements we missed? All right, we'll go ahead. Next up, we have reports. We're going to have the principal reports at the 2nd October meeting, but we'll start with
Why
the
don't we flip
superintendent
mine,
report.
if that's okay, because
Okay.
mine kind of flows into the discussion items.
Yeah.
Is that okay if we have food service, special services, and curriculum go first?
Makes sense.
Okay.
Let's start with food services.
I think Ben is
are you
here.
on here?
Ben, are you here?
Oh,
Yes.
I'm here.
There he is. So just a little intro. I think Leo asked, or someone asked for some food service program data. Is that you, Leo? Someone did. Anyway, one of you did. Ben has, a lot of data to share, and I asked him to put together some comparison data. I think that was kind of reflective of what the request was, to show, March to present in current year compared to March to present in previous years. And I'll just say that we have a good problem in our food service department that really has been partially caused by this time that we've been under. We have more money than is acceptable according to the Department of Ed in our kind of our balance in that account. And we've had a higher level of subsidy because when you are participating, and Ben will get into that, in this National School Lunch Summer Food Program, there's a higher level of subsidy return. And also we haven't been expending like we typically do on some equipment upgrades because for the last year and a half, we've been looking to the renovation and didn't want to invest money in things that were going to be a part of that. So, Ben can kind of speak to that a little bit, but I just wanted to set the stage for the information he has to share with you. So Ben.
Well, then let's get to it, I suppose.
Yes, and they've had a chance to look at it, so if you'll just hit the highlights.
Beautiful. So as you can see, it's a very, in broad strokes, participation is down as we expect because, during the time period, children weren't in school. So we're down. But the big highlight is, as was mentioned, that the subsidy is, it's about $1 more a child per day per meal. So if you have lunch and breakfast, you get $1 more. So even though participation is down quite a bit, we got quite a bit more money, plus the additional months of July and August, which we normally don't have much participation. We were able to feed the community for 7 days. So that was great for us, and that's quite a bit more helpful for everybody involved. This is summer program proceeds. We can continue to feed people 7 days. So we'll have a lot more to utilize to help out the community than we normally do. So if you look at the summary for March total, I broke it down for 3 years just to give you a brief outlook of what it normally looks like. For 2018, in that time period, we served 23,000 lunches, and then 2019, we served a little, 100 less, 22,800. And then during COVID, we served 19,000. But if you look at the numbers, we doubled the amount of money we got from the state because of the 7 days that we could serve and just because of the higher rate. It's a silver lining in COVID, I guess. I would like to be able to feed more, but it is, it is what it is. I think we're seeing the more real need people coming forward. in which we hope to reach more of if we can get a delivery service going. But now that you guys have a chance to look at those numbers, is there any questions related to that? Leo?
I guess I got a comment and a question. And the comment is, I think that, you know, what you and your team have been able to do during COVID in terms of getting food out there to students and also out to the larger community is a huge success story. And so, you know, kudos to you and your group for making that happen. And then the question part is, as you said, we normally do not participate in the summer program kind of pre-COVID, but I know that there are some schools in the area who have summer programs. So when COVID ends, do you anticipate that we'd be able to keep our summer program going?
No, it's
or
based on free and reduced percentages. We're not even remotely close to hitting the 50%.
Okay.
Required.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Ben. Yes, I did ask this a while ago, so sorry. There wasn't a recent ask, I don't think. So I appreciate you remembering. I didn't ask last time, did I? Maybe I did. But anyway, appreciate that. So just so I understand what I'm looking at for the March through September totals, what percentage? I mean, it must be a huge percentage of the 2020s were actually deliveries of that 19,290, correct? Unlike any other year, isn't because or were people coming in when we didn't have school and getting meals? I guess that's how we did it at the beginning, right?
Yeah, I mean, we started delivery fairly quick out of ASA. And most of it was remote pickup, but we were doing about half what came out of ASA as delivery. So we were probably during those, like the March through June, we're probably doing 800 meals a week in delivery.
And what we weren't delivering, people were coming and picking up, even though we didn't have school going on for like the majority of that, right? So I mean, that's kind of that's my only, I guess, point. Which a little bit of this isn't an apples to apples comparison, maybe, but I mean, I think it's really good data, and it's great that we maintained in 2020 to that level that we did. If I'm looking at this correctly, given that students weren't here. And we were, so they were coming in for the meals and delivering versus a normal year. We were off 3,000 meals or something for that period, but or 3,500 maybe. Am I reading that correctly? So we're up by 3,500, but isn't that a valid point? That I mean, all of this was almost remote except for September.
Yes and no. It is, but you got to remember. That's why I included some of the days served data, Leo, because I mean, like in a regular month, we might serve 20 days because we're only here, 5 days a week. So some of those meals are weekend meals, which we normally wouldn't net.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm seeing that now. So 190 verse 90. Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, sorry, I didn't study this more beforehand, but I will have a look and let you know if I have any further questions. But thank you. I think this is good data, and I think it's impressive what we've done through this pandemic. So thank you for that.
No problem.
Any other questions or
Something we need to do with the money excess, or can we leave that for a certain amount of time?
So what we're having to do is spend some, because Ben has some needs that would help him in the current mode of service he's having to provide. So he has developed kind of some expenditures that we can do to help this. And then we can also, if there's any remaining in the amount that they said we're over, we can write a letter explaining. But we did that last year, and basically, this year's letter said you did that last year, so this year we kind of expect you to do something different. We did decrease our subsidy, if you recall, to food service this year because we saw that balance and knew that last year we'd gotten a letter. So we decreased the subsidy to the program. So you know, we're going to have less going into the program this year. But if you look, you know, the subsidy is just so much different than typical because of the, you know, summer food program and the higher reimbursement rate. So I imagine a lot of schools are going to get into this kind of dilemma if they ran a robust program delivering food during, you know, the months that we had March through, you know, the summer. So that's the plan. It's about $26,000 they're telling us we have to spend. And Ben has, I think about 20,000 of that pretty easily spent with some refrigeration needs he has. And so we've talked some with CHA to see if there's something we could buy for that. But the problem with that is it's just not a match for what we could use now. We don't have a lot of storage to store things if we were to buy big items. And so we're going to buy some things that Ben can use with the way we're having to do our current program, and then write the letter to the state. But, you know, it also goes kind of, you know, Ben has done a nice job with the fiscal management of the program and trying to maximize, you know, us not going in the hole like has been historically the case. So it's a good problem to have, right? It's a kind of a unusual coincidence that we're in though with this increased subsidy.
Anything else for Ben?
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
I think Lisa's up next.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
So we'll start with the health office. We've got Karen Martin and Heather James have been just doing an outstanding job addressing all the health needs in all 3 schools. Kids call in sick, the administrative assistants in each school are documenting when students are out and why, and that information is uploaded daily to a spreadsheet for Karen to review. Meredith and Karen and I have also been reviewing the standard operating procedures that have been put out by the Maine DOE for positive identification of COVID cases. The documents was put out probably a couple weeks ago, and it's already been updated a half a dozen times. So we're comparing that document with what we have in place for our students, and we're finding that, you know, we're easily aligning with the state recommendations, if not exceeding them. And then moving on to ELL, Sandy Seavey was working with her ASA students in person and covering her OHS students remotely. And then on to special education. Right now, we've just finished our October count. We have approximately 202 students identified for special education services. This is up from 193 last spring. We've already had quite a flurry of students moving in and out of the district, and just trying to keep up with that and the meetings that go along with that. We've contracted with online services to meet our speech therapy needs, primarily at the high school and middle school, but also for some of our ASA students. And I'm going to give kudos to Kristen Briggs, who has had, she's been on the front lines of getting those students to those services in a timely manner. It's very much appreciated, you know, her willingness to do what it takes to get the kids where they need to be. We've also worked out a contract with CDS to be reimbursed for any services that we provide any of our pre-K students. There were some that were looking like they were coming in this summer, but those plans have changed, so we're not currently providing any services for CDS students. We've been able to add some additional services for our high-risk students while remaining within our safety parameters. So these recommendations are coming out of 504 or IEP meetings or students assistant team meetings, and they are handed to or forwarded on to the building principals, who decide basically if we've got room to allow these students to participate more than 2 days a week. So that's been working pretty smoothly. We had just started a partnership last spring in, I believe it was right before, you know, we went home for COVID with Acadia, and it was with Acadia Health to provide social work services for our students. And when we came back saying that we needed to have the social work services provided remotely, we lost that social worker, unfortunately. But Sam Runco and I have been on the interview committee with Acadia folks, and we have found a replacement that we're pretty excited about. She's moving to Maine from I think the Midwest. So we're looking forward to hitting the ground running when she gets here. And Acadia is still providing these services with other social workers that they have that are filling in the interim. Our teachers, our ed techs are working tirelessly to meet the needs of our students as outlined on their IEPs. We're having additional meetings to make changes regarding the amount of services that students are actually getting. I'm just amazed at the effort, and people are tired, but everyone is doing what they need to do for our kiddos. So it's been just reassuring, reaffirming. Our department is being audited by the DOE this year, which will mean additional duties for my admin assistants, but they remain positive at all times, and we'll show them what we're doing and see what it is that we may need to change. That's it on my end, unless there are any questions.
Any questions for Lisa? Thank you, Lisa. And Meredith D.
Thank you, Brian. As you can probably imagine, technology has been a significant focus of my work since this start here on July 1st. And luckily, there is a cohort of teachers in the district who have joined or rejoined the technology committee. And that committee has been integral to our work so far this year. We have been meeting weekly in an effort to identify and develop professional development needs, to organize resources, to make recommendations for technologies, to problem solve obstacles teachers are encountering with respect to delivering hybrid and remote instruction. And we recently developed a set of goals for our 2021 work. And I think that our hope is that even though our team, the committee has come together because of this unique and pressing circumstance, that the collective work this year can serve as a foundation for a long-term vision for technology in RSU 26 that is forward-thinking and specifically geared toward manifesting the kind of relationship that we hope to have between technology and education here in the district. So I just want to acknowledge the significant work that those teachers have done with no small help from Jason Burgess and Melissa Barton. We also have had the opportunity to amplify our relationship to the out of doors with respect to instruction. I think that there's a lot of knowledge already existing about the significance of the circulation that you are able to have outside and the way that that is a risk mitigator. And we have supported that by offering supplies and opportunities for teachers to dig into strategies for outdoor learning since the summer. Kim Oldenburg, second grade teacher down at ASA, spent a few days at the Juniper Hill School in Alna, Maine, which is a place-based school that offers guidance to teachers across the state who are interested in really developing their relationship to place-based instruction. And her attendance at Juniper Hill has turned into an ongoing dialogue at ASA with other teachers who are interested in outdoor learning, and that has continued to grow there. Also happening at ASA, Nate Case, our pre-K ed tech, has built a pretty amazing outdoor classroom for our pre-K students. And that has been, or involved a combination of his skill and know-how and supplies donated by Black Bear Landscaping and Home Gardens. Up at the middle school, we have Jess Archer. I want to recognize that she has been outside pretty much every single day. This week, she passed over 100 class meetings held outside since the beginning of the year. And that has, she has identified that as something that is benefiting her students' mental health and the relationship to their science instruction specifically. So like many districts in the region, we have a sharpened focus on the question of anti-racism and equity in our district. And what started as a book study of Stamped that began prior to my introduction to the district has turned into a district-wide anti-racism and equity in education team. And this is another group of teachers who are, working really hard to serve their students in the classroom, who are carving out this time because they believe in this work and making it happen on a district-wide level in spite of the challenges that they're facing with respect to hybrid and remote instruction. This team has been meeting periodically to structure the book study and facilitate the book study. We had our first meeting last month. We have our next meeting coming up on the 29th of this month. They planned and delivered professional development during our August professional development days. And they are also going to be presenting a session this Friday during our PD day that is focused on considering how Orono Schools tells a story of itself and what that means for us going forward. That work, the work of the Anti-Racism, Equity, and Education team has been augmented by our participation in the Cultural Competence Institute, which is an initiative offered jointly by the Maine School Boards Association and the Maine School Superintendents Association. We have 8 members, including Aaron, working on this, working toward cultural competence certification together. We have teachers, administrators, and a superintendent and a school board member participating in this. The goal of the project was to bring together 50 educators from across the state. The first session saw over 300. And I felt really proud to know that we had a team, or actually 2 teams representing us at that first session. The second session is coming up on October 19th. That session is titled Creating Brave Space for Conversations About Race. There will be a total of 8 sessions over the course of the year. And the question, before us, I think at this point, is what the trajectory of anti-racism and equity conversations in the district looks like and where that will lead. So far, conversations about equity and cultural representation in our curriculum have begun popping up around the district. This is something that teachers are thinking about. It is something that students are thinking about. And in the weeks and months to come, I anticipate that there will be an increasing frequency of intersections between our anti-racism work and our curriculum work. Our effort to meet the needs of students in this unique instructional circumstance has been supported by our district involvement in the Maine Curriculum Leaders Association. This is an organization that starting in March really served as a conduit for discussion and sharing of resources across the state in an effort to meet successfully all of the challenges of remote and hybrid instruction. And our involvement in this organization has grown quickly. We have had, again, teachers carving out extra time for this professional development. We had a month-long study in professional learning communities. We have had recent sessions attended by teachers in motivating and engaging learners and meaningful assessment and feedback, both challenges that teachers have identified as a consequence of remote and hybrid instruction. And we also have teachers participating in a year-long study of the distance learning playbook through our involvement in MCLA. Back in August, the Maine DOE requested, again, a waiver from the Federal Department of Education for accountability measures, including statewide assessment. This year, the federal DOE has denied all states' requests for waivers. The state is not sure if that denial will hold, despite whatever the COVID circumstance brings. However, in response to this, the state has indicated that it is, quote, continuing to seek flexibilities and look for opportunities to revolutionize our assessment system to best inform instruction and support student learning. So, of course, our administration of assessments in district will depend on recommendations that come from the state with respect to the timing and the format of those. The governance committee has begun meeting to ensure that teachers who are up for recertification this year have the support they need to see that through. And in addition, we have 10 separate teachers who have agreed to serve as mentors for our new teachers in the district, those with conditional certification and those who have changed roles. So I would like to recognize those teachers because of that, the significance of that commitment. Friday, we'll commence a district-wide study of the distance learning playbook. This is a text that has gained significant traction across the country in its pragmatic and solution-based orientation to learning when students are not right in front of us. We will talk about 2 modules of the 9 from this book on Friday. And using CRF funds, we will be supporting a continued district-wide study of this book that will involve paid time for teachers to read all 9 modules, and then we plan to have 3 meetings to engage in discussion and process what that work means for us in our instruction. So that concludes my my board report. I would just like to acknowledge the fact that when I interviewed for this job, I was clear about my orientation to curriculum coordinator work as that of a facilitator. But that is a role that hinges directly on the relationships that folks are willing to have with me, right? Because as a facilitator, I can do very little if folks are not willing to engage and share. And the teachers and administrators in this district every single one has welcomed me, has opened their classroom, has opened their mind to me. And I feel very, very grateful to be here.
Great, thanks. Any questions? I had a couple. Well, first of all, it's just great to see all this energy and development and curriculum, which I think is exactly, speaking for myself, what the board had in mind when we created this position. So it's wonderful to be here, curriculum being talked about in this depth at a board meeting. Not that it didn't happen with other venues before, but it's really nice to see this focus on it. And one question, the outdoor, I'm wondering, well, question / comment, I'm wondering how that, what thoughts are going into continuing that in the cold weather? I know one concern has always been, well, some kids don't have snowsuits or whatever, but given the way the CREF money is around, seems to me like that's a financially soluble problem. So I'm just wondering what thought has been going into what kind of resources we could use to make sure the outdoor stuff continues into the colder weather.
That's a great point, Ryan. We have our approach to supporting outdoor learning has really been teacher focused, in that whatever teachers are willing to do, we support without an expectation of really what that looks like, in an effort to make sure that it is something that is intrinsically motivated by the teacher. The Juniper Hill School that Kim attended this year emphasizes that, you know, for many place-based curricula, there is no seasonal limitation on outdoor learning. And so I know that there are some folks in the district who do not perceive that to be a limitation and will be adapting instruction depending on how the seasons change. That being said, to be honest, there really hasn't been a discussion about how to use CRF money to support individual student needs with respect to appropriate gear for colder weather. But that is something that I will take with me and talk with Meredith about to see how we can make that work.
Yeah, or maybe that's the wrong resource, but I just think it's the time to identify resources right now, even
For
though
sure.
it's not quite here. The question I had, you were talking about assessment. If I was reading between the lines, we're going to have to go ahead with the state. I can never keep track of what the name of it is. It's been, I think, 3 different names since I've been on the board, which is only 5 or 6 years. But the state assessment, which I've always found to be much less useful than the NUIAs. So I'm aware that there's problems with both, but I'm wondering what the thought is for NUIAs versus the state assessment and where we're thinking about that.
So the state the message coming from the state, this idea of reading between the lines is that there is a hesitancy on their part to think that we will be able to administer as we have administered in the past in the spring, and that the utility of that and the reliability of that data is suspect because of our current conditions. So the message really is that things will not be as they have been, but we don't know what they will look like yet. So it's really hard for us to say what that state assessment may involve. The conversation about NUIA for us is more nuanced. I have attended trainings offered by NUIA that talk about what administration looks like in these contexts. NUIA does have workarounds for administering to students remotely. They are, as you can imagine, more time intensive, and they, require that administration happens in pockets really no larger than about 8 students at a time. We have had that conversation within buildings, not across buildings, but in pockets. And I think that the message that I've received is that we need to get to the end of the first quarter before we re-engage the conversation of NUIA. There is some concern about equity, and if we are administering NUIA to students who are not in the building, how reliable will that data be, and what will be the utility of it, especially given the time-intensive investment that it is. Right, it's not an assessment that we want to take lightly. But to answer your question specifically, our conversation about NUIA is at the beginning stages with respect to what it looks like when we are still engaged in hybrid and remote learning for some students.
Fair enough. And, just to be clear, I don't just presume that we should do a NUIA this year. All the arguments about the state assessment in terms of, is it really a useful thing to judge people in this strange, well, that's what the state assessment has been set up to do historically. But, in these strange times, it's not clear to me that there's anything to do. The thing about the NUIA is it actually provides individual student-based information, which historically has been useful for instruction. So I leave it to the teachers and the curriculum coordinator, et cetera, to decide whether that's really a worthwhile, application of time this time around. But at least it's conceivable to me that there's a benefit for instruction from the NUIAs, where I think it's really hard to see any benefit from the state assessments right now. So I agree with where the state's trying to go with that.
Well, and the reality is that there are alternative measures, and Lisa and I have had a conversation about this. Alternative measures for accessing some of that student-specific data to help fuel teaching and learning in the classroom that is student-centered, that doesn't necessarily involve the time investment that NUIA requires. And so that, should we decide that NUIA is perhaps not the route that we want to go at some point, there are other routes that we can investigate to accomplish the goal that you've identified.
Makes sense. Any other questions?
Yeah, maybe a little bit of a follow-up on that one. I'm curious, Meredith, your opinion, if I can ask for that on this, because it's less about the ability to administer those tests versus the value of it. I'm curious because I've thought about it, and my rudimentary thinking, because I'm not involved in education, just seems, to me, it sounds like one of those things, don't ask the question you don't want to know the answer to. We just had these kids out of school for a quarter plus, and now we're in this hybrid mode. And so to think that we're going to set them up for assessments that are on par with where they've always been, I think is a little bit of a fallacy. And I'm just curious if you feel that there is value, and I get the point of knowing where kids are, but it just seems the time and effort to do that doesn't. I'm curious what your thought is, and if you have any ability to be giving your thoughts at the state level. I understand some of it's coming from the federal level, so that's different. But if they're hearing from us bottom up, like instead of hearing from them on what we're going to do and how we can do it, like are they hearing from us on what we think is appropriate to do, since you guys are the ones in the building with the students?
So I'm going to take that question in those two questions in two stages. So with respect to my opinion, I, as a self-identified facilitator in the district, I would be inclined to identify first what would be our goal for administering these assessments, right? So if we were going to administer them WIA or some alternative, I would want to know what it is that we want to glean from this data before deciding to administer it. And then once we identify what that goal is, I would want to know for sure that the administration of the assessment and the reliability for that data that we would anticipate would then help us achieve that goal. And if the answer to that question is no, then the question becomes, okay, well, is there an alternative that will help us achieve that goal, or is that goal unachievable at this time in this circumstance? So the most direct answer that I can offer to you, Leo, is that I would want to know specifically before administering an assessment what the goal for the administration would be, and a relative surety that the administration of it would help us achieve that. To your second question, the word from the feds came down on September 3rd. And so discussion at the state level about what our state assessments may look like this spring is in its very early stages. And it has not reached the stage for inviting public comment yet. But I can assure you that when it does, I am happy to share my perspective with the state and participate in that discussion if there is an avenue for me to do so.
Great. And I would encourage you to create an avenue potentially if need be. My other question is, I got a couple quick ones. No, just one other question. You mentioned developing goals for 2021 technology goals. Is that a document that can be shared? I would be interested to see what we're planning and looking to do there. So, and then the last is just a comment. Glad to hear you say that there's been such great willing engagement. Not that I assumed there wouldn't be, but that was a little bit of my hesitation with this position, to be very candid, that I think it relies on that, and it sounds like you're the person for making it happen. So I think that's great to hear, and so thanks for sharing that, and thanks to the staff that's been so.
Any other questions or comments?
I don't have a question. I do have a comment, though. It's kind of building off of both Brian and Leo's points, particularly focused on the NUIAs. I'm largely in agreement with Brian on the state assessment in terms of what it provides. Maybe not quite as negative as Brian, but not that far away from that. On the other hand, I've always found the NUIAs to be incredibly valuable for parents in terms of they figuring one indicator, not the only one, but one indicator of where their students are, valuable for teachers and valuable for us, certainly administrators, and valuable for the board as well. And I think one of the big advances over the past few years is district-wide, our willingness to engage with the data and to make useful progress with those NUIA data. And I totally understand the difficulties that administering the NUIAs in this kind of environment creates, and the huge amount of time when time is incredibly precious, because you've only got students in the building a limited amount of time compared to what we normally have them. That all being said, I would hate to end that conversation about administering or not administering them prematurely, because at some point we are going to have to get our heads around exactly exactly where our students are when we come out of the other side of COVID. And my guess is we're going to have to, we're going to have some deficits that we're going to have to address. And in order to address those, we need to know where they are. And the NUIAs, because they go back over time, will be a huge, I would think, a huge tool for us figuring out where our kids are. And so if there's a way that's practicable to administer those at some point during the 2021 academic year, I would hope that we would take advantage of that.
No, I agree, Mark, that data is important, and we absolutely are going to need to identify, where our areas of focus are moving forward. And, like I said, that conversation is right at the beginning, and I anticipate, it being something that we really dig into in the months to come.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? All right, thank you, Meredith. And I think now we go to the supers report.
Thank you for those reports and information. That was really helpful to catch everyone up. We have a lot going on, as you can tell from just, these reports are just a glimpse into one part of the work happening. And so before we kind of jump into school reopening plans and things associated with that, trying to see if there's anything not related to that in my report. Actually, let's see. I think it's actually all related to that in some way. So I want to start with the CRF funds, the coronavirus relief funds, and just give you a little update on those. We have, first we have 3 categories, or 3, actually 4 sources of CRF or CARES funds. So the first amount we got was the $94,000. That was the original CARES allocation, and that's the longest lasting. They are good like through next September, I think. But we have plans for them to pick up some of the things we're funding with CRF from December through the end of the year. But CRF is kind of the new money that came first about August, and then another round that just came in September. And then coronavirus relief funds also have some special pockets of funds. So adult ed has some coronavirus relief funds. It's a really small amount. And then we applied for the day programming or childcare CRF. So I want to let you know we did receive the day programming childcare CRF funds. We have been working with a group from UMaine to develop that programming. I feel like we're almost at the point where we're ready to advertise to people. We're trying to finalize, basically when they got into legal's hands, things just, kind of slowed down a little. Lots of nuances had to be explored. And so I think we're almost at the point where we're ready to roll it out. And so that program, we hope to have something out this week. That's the hope. It's going to be for grades 3 through 5, and will be free of charge for any RSU 26 student participating. And then beyond that, after RSU 26 families have the opportunity to enroll, then the university will offer it to their employees who have children under hybrid in those grades. It's being programmed and run by the university, and basically we're contracting with them with these funds to run this program. So it's, it's mutually beneficial, but the lift is really heavy on their side to stand up this program. And, people have to be, have the DOE fingerprinting, which is, time consuming, and the facility had to be obtained because they didn't have room on campus. So they're trying to lease a facility. And so lots of logistics that have had to be worked out. And so that amount for that grant is $198,000, and it has to be spent by December 31st. I'm not sure we'll get to the point of being able to expend it all because of just the time it's taken to for startup, but it will, provide families with 2.5 months of programming. Should there be another round of funding, we may be able to continue it free of charge. but I think we're going to use this 2.5 months as a kind of trial run. And as anything changes with, programming, or we can look at demand, we can determine what happens after December. So that's one pocket of money. The other two CRF funding mechanisms are, designed to help districts provide school under these conditions. So anything that we're having to expend funds on that help us overcome challenges that COVID creates that wasn't previously budgeted for, pretty much is the lens that we have to use with this. The first round, we received $634,000, and we bought a lot of materials, supplies. I'd say that the largest category of expenditure were those kinds of things, and a lot of expenditures are categorized under that umbrella. So, the plexiglass, some furnishings, the filters that we bought, the air purifiers, some PPE, cleaning supplies, the outdoor learning materials, just, lots of materials such as those. And then we had some larger expenditures for staffing. So like the contracted service for custodial services, some of the other positions that we've hired, the remote teacher, the health aide, the technology assistant, the permanent subs, I'm forgetting something, I think. And then just some extra hours that we're paying people to serve on teams to help work on things to figure out what we're doing this summer and then as we moved into the fall. So we're paying for those positions. And then we've upgraded some technology to be able to expand our one-to-one program. We're also having some equipment failure, so we're doing some replacement. And some of the tools that we found we needed to be able to provide remote and synchronous instruction. We've been test driving a lot of materials and trying to find what works to solve problems. And things like licenses that we needed for, so lots of, it's been addressing lots of needs. The problem with this money is it has to be spent by December 30 and can't pay for anything that after December 30. So licenses, we can only prorate through December for licenses we bought for a year. They came out with that technical assistance after everyone had bought their licenses. So that was a little bit of a disappointment, but I don't think we would have made different decisions about any of these based on, what we've purchased. So the same limitation comes with staffing. We can only pay for those services through December 30. We've talked about that. We put some of those costs into the CARES money for the December through, June expenditures, and then some will be part of that we have if there is not another funding source that comes through. The van we talked about last meeting, we have purchased a van. It'll arrive this week. Look forward to beginning to be able to use that to solve, like being able to do some food delivery to make food more accessible to families on hybrid days or remote days, and to augment our transportation. And then some HVAC upgrades that we have been working on with our system are also included in these figures. So we had, a lot of money to spend in a short time frame, and we've done pretty well to spend most of it already, or at least have it in the works. And then they came with another round that's a little bit larger than the first, another $665,000 that also has to be spent by December. So, it's just a little bit maddening. I mean, I never want to say, I don't want this money, because there's some things we're going to try to do with this money, but it's not the terms that we really truly needed for this money. I mean, it would have been wonderful if they said, here's this money, and you have until June 30 of 2021 to spend it. That's exactly what everyone needed, but it's not what we got. But we have some ideas of things we're going to try to do with this money. It has to be figured out really quickly and submitted by late next week, our application. So we've been working on things, and one of the challenges being able to accomplish any projects that we set out to do by December 30. You have to have everything done in working order, ready to go and paid for by December 30 with this money. So people that wanted to build things, you know, you have to really think about, can I get this done in this time frame, or can I order this and is it available to be here by December 30? So there's just some real challenges around this. It's been I mean, I don't want to look, you know, a gift horse in the mouth on this, but it's like it's quite the burden to try to figure all this out on such a short time frame, and when all of this is happening around us. So it's just felt very frantic to be spending this money on this kind of time frame. So, you know, but it's really helped fill a gap, right? So I'm really grateful to have it, but I also none of us want to look like we don't need this money and to turn money back over to the state. So we're doing what we can to try to spend this money. Some of the things we're looking at are another kind of round of air purifiers as we head into winter season, and people are going to be closing the windows and not using the fans as much. Just another extra of an air purifier in rooms to augment what we've been able to accomplish with open windows and fans. We're looking where to put all this stuff that we've got and trying to make it accessible during the winter outdoors. And so we're looking at actually building a storage building out back that we can throw all this stuff in and house, and have a space where all of our PE equipment, when, you know, they're trying to get to things in the winter and not crossing over into other buildings. So we think we can build a storage building. We think we can do it in the time we need out back. And so we're trying to do that. We're also looking at a larger project would be some districts have done backup generators so that their HVAC system can continue to run when power goes down in the winter, and to keep airflow going. And, you know, that would be something that would really fill a need on a number of levels. And so we're looking at whether or not we can get that done and get the equipment here. We're looking at some smaller things, just, you know, more cleaning supplies, more hand sanitizer, you know, trying to fill the closet, more furnishings that we might need as we consider, you know, if we're bringing more students back, do we need some more desks to replace tables? Do we need, you know, other types of furnishings to be able to accomplish that? We're looking at outdoor tent heaters to try to extend the use of our outdoor tents. And so Brent's working with going to work with the town fire department to see what we could do in that regard. They are allowed, but you have to be very, you know, careful with what you're buying. That's something else we're looking at. We're also looking at expanding our outdoor connectivity. That's been a barrier for some outdoor learning to get too far from the building because you lose your connection. So we're trying to expand that so that there's a greater availability of the Wi-Fi when you go outdoors. Some more technology that, you know, sound is really one of the things we've been trying to solve. And so we're trying to finish out some addressing that. We've been having people experiment with different tools, and we want to see if, you know, we can find something that will address the classrooms that haven't had that solved yet for them. One of the things that we are continuing to have as a challenge is our equipment failure. I mentioned under CRF1, one of the things we did, we haven't told staff yet, I think the order went in today, is we're replacing any staff laptops that are in that original batch of Milty, because we're having just a lot of failure and performance issues. And so Jason assessed how many of those are in that old lifespan. And so we're doing a complete replacement of those. We don't have enough backups because as the laptops are getting old, we're sending them out for repair a lot, and we just don't have enough to hand out to be loaners. So, you know, we're trying to do things like that to help make the work, you know, easier, more manageable. So I just wanted to give you a sense for what's happening. There's some items a little further down on the agenda that we're going to talk about, like the hiring of a temporary delivery driver, that are kind of related to CRF too. So I wanted to give you an idea of the whole picture of CRF. And, you know, I think the second round of funding is very politicized right now. You've probably read a little bit about that's happening. So I just don't know what to think about that, but I'm hopeful that either this funding can be extended, but it would take an act of Congress to do that, or there's a new funding stream. But, you know, in our state, we've been fortunate to be the recipient of some of these funds. It's a state decision how they allocate their relief funds, and we've been fortunate in our state that our governor and state leadership has prioritized schools to receive these. So I'm really grateful. I don't want to sound like I'm not appreciative of these funds. It's just been really difficult to figure out under the terms we have how we can meet the needs that we have. So any questions about CRF? And Lynn has more information also. I know she's listening.
Quick question, just so I'm clear. So we got $1.3 million basically that we have to spend between now and December. Is that effectively?
Yes.
And then 94 goes on through June.
Correct.
Or whatever. Got it. That's awesome problem.
It is.
Unfortunate that we're scurrying around like chickens with your heads cut off. That's too bad. Can I just ask on the child care for ages 5, do you have a rough number of people that have raised their hand
when
for
we
that?
sent out
Just out of curiosity.
the initial survey, we had around 54 students who families said, hey, I'd be interested, either yes, I'm interested, or I might be interested in that. And then we had around 8 staff members who had children who attended other districts in the same grade span who had a similar need that they would take advantage of this potentially if it was offered. So this program is designed to hold up to 150 if needed. So the university staff, you know, there's room for university staff children as well.
Which would obviously be coming from other communities, right?
Yep.
Yep. Was it 198 that has to be spent on the child
That's
care?
right. That's specifically for the
is.
child care program.
And that's out. Is that part of the either of that 1.3 or the
No.
94? It's completely
Yes.
separate. Oh, okay. All right. Awesome.
Sure.
Thank you.
I will just one thing. People have been doing their invoicing, and this is, you know, spend and then you submit for reimbursement on these. And so we submitted our first reimbursement a couple of weeks ago for the months of July and August. And we had been hearing feedback from others that it was a really difficult process, and because you have to justify with every expenditure how it ties back to the need that has been outlined, that these funds are designed to address. And so when Lynn submitted that, she took great care with it. We got word from them that it was the first submission they had received that didn't require any corrections or you know, additional information. So kudos for that. And, you know, fingers crossed that we have continued good fortune with that, but also it was just a lot, Lynn took a lot of time and care with that. And
I was gonna say, I bet you that's not good fortune. That's more Lynn than good fortune, right?
well, yeah, I just don't want to jinx us by saying that either. So we have a lot in front of us to file for, and I know she's probably going to be nervous me saying that out loud. But, you know, I appreciate the work that everyone's doing. It's a lot of work on a lot of individuals to process all of this. And I know, you know, there are times when teachers are feeling frustrated that we aren't getting things to them in the manner that they would like, and the timeline. And some of it is just the volume of purchasing we're doing right now is just, you know, exponentially more than typical. And some of it's availability. We're finding that some things are hard to, there's a longer wait time for technology of almost any sort, especially Apple products. There's a pretty long wait time compared to what we're typically able to secure. So any questions on that? So the enrollment update, I sent you the numbers that show our unofficial October 1 count. The October 1 counts this year are really different than normal, and they asked us to submit them, but there's not quite the formal process it usually is, but we have been trying to be as careful as we ever are with these numbers, because they're really important for subsidy and for lots of other uses at the state level. So what you see here is kind of our unofficial number. We're at 810 when I published this, and then it changed to 811 because we do have coming and going happening, all the time. You can see that primarily we're up at the high school. We're down at the middle school. It's just that big bubble that moved that really caused that. And so, when I was looking today at a spreadsheet that MSMA is asking us to fill out to kind of share our enrollment numbers. There's a lot of concern around the state for dropping subsidy based on dropping enrollment, for loss of students to homeschool during this time. I think we were the only district that had reported on our region sheet that had an increase. So I'm feeling a little, I felt a little badly putting those numbers in, but I'm really also, it's great to be in the position we're in. I really feel for my colleagues. But we have, a really strong enrollment this year. You can see the homeschool numbers there. That's not something we've ever really reported to you. It's not something we've ever really done much with, other than kind of what the state requires. So you can see we did have a slight uptick. And also the 25 number for last year shows a full year, right? So 33 is just up to now. And typically with homeschool, there is some coming and going we see over the course of the year. So I would think this year might be a year where you have some coming and going happening. Also, typically in the 25, for example, there are part-timers that were part-time this year or last year. I think in that 25, I remember 5 for sure, but it seems like Lynn said there were 8 or 9 part-timers in our FTE last year. This year, there are only 2 right now that we see that are part-time there. It kind of intersects this data a little bit with the enrollment by category sheet. I put that in today. I don't know if you've had a chance to see it, but it kind of takes these same enrollment numbers and shows in each grade level how are students attending right now, how many, and at what grades are they, and what numbers attending full in-person, hybrid, and then full remote. So you can kind of see how that looks across grades. I think it's maybe a testament to the work that our teachers did last spring to provide really quality education for students, that we didn't lose more families to homeschool because, people had confidence in what we were offering. And people are sticking with us. We're not seeing people withdraw to homeschool. We've actually had some return already who started the year in homeschool, but it just didn't work out. And so we're having some come back. So, I'm feeling good about the numbers. And certainly if you kind of think back to our enrollment study, this is following the trend that our enrollment study predicted of kind of the increasing enrollment that our district should be seeing. Do you have any questions about this data?
I have one question about the enrollment category summary that you just shared with us. So admittedly, this is the first time I looked at it, was when you pointed it out before the meeting started, now bringing it up again. Looking at, particularly at the high school numbers, that seems to me to be a very small number of students who are attending full-time in person. And I know that when we were trying to work out, the plan over the summer, there was talk about folks up at the high school working to identify those students who were at risk or would particularly benefit from attending full-time, and trying to get those students in, 4 days or 5 days, probably 4 days a week at the high school. And for some reason, I figured I just envisioned a larger number than that. Certainly, I didn't think that we'd be less than 10 in that category. So I'm wondering if those efforts didn't really pan out, or if I mean, it'd be great if we really had that few students who are at risk in a variety of ways, but I find that hard to believe.
We've been really working on that actually, and I know that kind of that first grading period midpoint is a real key time to assess how kids are doing with those grades. And I think, they've been having meetings to try to address some of that with families. And sometimes it might be a process of, working on some steps to get to interventions that might not, the first step might not be attending full in person. But Reg and Sam can kind of speak. I see Reg on the call. Reg, do you want to address that in a more specific way?
Yeah, this doesn't reflect the number that we've had actually moved to full remote in September. So we've probably had, I'm going to say 7-ish move over to that full remote category. So kind of that full in-person of 3, 4, 5, of 7. Well, I guess I wouldn't have been in that category in the full in person. So yeah, it's just something we're working on. I mean, the trend was for a while that they were going into full remote. We're trying to get them in person. We have a process that we're using, IEPs and 504s and student assistants, team meetings. I feel like the last 2 weeks I'm kind of making the final approval to get them here, full in person. And so we're doing about 1 a day at this point, but it's really only been for the last week and a half that I feel like parents are really starting to consider it. So
that's great. That's great to hear there's progress on that. I mean, just, rereading through the comments, the parent survey comments, at all the schools, there was a number, but it seemed like to me that there were maybe a few more at the high school where parents were saying, my student is really struggling with the remote learning, and it'd be great to get them back in more days. So I think we'd have, even if we just stayed where we are right now, I think we've got the capacity to bring some more people back 4 days at the high school. So I'm glad to hear that we're making some progress on that.
Yeah. And this table doesn't reflect the ones that have come from full remote into hybrid either.
Okay. Thank you.
And that's been an area of concern where we've seen probably a higher percentage of kids struggling and who elected for full remote. So we've been really working with some of those students to try to move them to more in-person time and try to address concerns they might have with that if we can. So that's been probably the most focused area of the efforts right now.
Just to clarify that, Reg, you lost me a little bit there at the beginning. Were you saying that the people that have gone to full remote were people that were in full attending? Is that what you were saying?
No. So we've had, I would say maybe the first 2 or 3 weeks, we had a number who were attending hybrid.
Okay.
And shifted to full remote. And that's
okay.
Then
I missed
a number who have been full remote who are shifting to hybrid, and that back and forth isn't really captured in this table. And then, so our goal, so we're really working on the full remote kids to get them here 2 days a week, hybrid, and then the strugglers who are hybrid right now, getting them from 2 days to 4 days. So the table captures the ones who we've shifted from 2 days to 4 days, but it's not really capturing the ones that have moved from full remote to hybrid, or vice versa. I almost feel like we're slightly ahead, but we have more that have shifted from full remote to hybrid than the ones who went in the other direction kind of those first couple weeks.
Gotcha.
Did that make sense, Leo? I felt like I rambled.
No, that's helpful. Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions on this? I mean, one of the things that, this chart's helpful, it's going to be helpful as we shift into our next steps discussion. But I know one thing that I've heard Reg and Sam talk about is just the about 20% of our high school students in full remote. and that, that's really an area where they're trying to, talk with families that it doesn't seem to be a good fit for them in terms of student success. So that's something that's been a real focus of their time and energy. So, if families are, if it's working well with them and they, are able to sustain their, keep up with their work and have good attendance, it seems like, that's something that we would support continuing. But it's, we're finding that a lot of students are not able to maintain that under remote with even lots of supports in place. I mean, there's some families that are, and students that are doing great with it, but a higher percentage that we would like that are not doing well with it.
Part of my reason for asking for this, just I guess spitballing a little bit. One, I was just really curious to see how many we had full remote, and along with the survey information, was curious if it, because we hired a teacher at ASA, right? And was that teacher hired just to do remote learning?
Right, they do K-2 remote learning.
K2, so we don't have anyone doing 3-5,
well,
just remote
we
learning.
have it done differently. We have a teacher dedicated to 4th and some 5th. We have an ed tech working with the 3rd grade group. So we have a dedicated teacher. It was just someone, we consolidated classes and freed up a teacher in 4th, 5th.
Okay, so classroom teachers are or aren't, are there any classroom teachers that are doing both duties?
One 5th grade teacher who has a smaller enrollment is augmenting the 5th grade remote learning and also has a smaller in-person cohort.
Gotcha. All right, so I guess that's where I was wondering if it would be possible to accomplish that, but it sounds like you maybe sort of already have, so that's good. But I'm sure it gets a lot more convoluted at the high school level, like everything always does. So.
And middle school is, it's
yeah.
For both of those, it's people have live in person and remote.
Gotcha. Thanks.
So kind of shifting to, I wanted to give an update on busing before we jumped into some other discussion about the survey and such. And I've asked Brent to be here tonight to hopefully answer any questions you might have about this. And also there's some other people on the call who could jump in as well. Started having some questions from a few of you when we were looking at how to handle our transportation to extracurricular activities, and we did the survey about could families transport, could students transport. So bus capacity is a really I think challenging thing to figure out, because the guidance is not very specific. It's really up to us to figure out the spacing on buses, and I've copied for you kind of behind this cover page there, I think three pages or so of the different sets of guidance that we have received and are kind of using in whole, a combination of sources, both from the Department of Ed and the CDC. And so in looking at bus capacities, usually, buses have around 26 to 28 seats. And so when we were looking at how to do spacing, and sitting on a bus and kind of considering how close the seats are, some districts were choosing to follow this graphic that's on this cover page that shows kind of the checkerboard approach of students in every seat sitting offset. And when I measured that, I just was really not comfortable with that. It's particularly for older students whose heads come above the seats, and you can basically blow hard and move the person's hair sitting diagonal from you. I mean, for sure you can stand up and touch them without really much of an effort. So it's about 30 inches what Mike Archer and Brent and I got on the bus when we were doing all this and measured this, and I could knock Mike on the head pretty easily from sitting right behind him. And so we developed this kind of every other row, kind of alternating rows to go up And so our bus capacities are greatly reduced. We have, the only place we've made the exception is at ASA. Well, two exceptions. One, if people are siblings, students are siblings, they can sit together. And at ASA, in some cases, we had more ridership needs than we had spaces using that model. And so I've approved us to do this model in a limited capacity, like, you know, almost every district around us is using this model that you see on this page, because there is a barrier. Their heads don't really come up above the seats. And so there's just a little more separation that way, but really only doing that in limited capacities. Brent shared with me the bus ridership spreadsheet today, and I think, you know, depending on the day, we have, I think, one bus a day, so that most days has one or two or three extra that my method doesn't work, so we have to shift to this method for a few kids, and then another bus on one day. What I am looking at, you know, so if we consider, you know, more students coming back, how does the bus issue, you know, impact those decisions? Middle and high school, it's not an issue for our Orno buses. They have lots of room on them. It's the elementary buses, and you know, for what we're going to talk about in a little while, I don't think it's going to be an issue for the first step, but it's something we would have to problem solve around probably for another step past that, and that's something we'll have to do with SEER. And maybe, you know, we have CRF funds. You know, we can look at, you know, more vans. We can, you know, there's things we can try to do, but it's hard when we have this contracted service and our contracted service provider says it's hard for me to find drivers to add more runs for you. But, you know, we're going to try to problem solve this, like I said, for after kind of a first step if we're problem solving down the road. So I wanted you to know my thinking behind buses, kind of, you know, SEER is adhering for the most part to everything that you see on the pages that follow this. And like anything, you know, we get feedback that something's not being followed. We get that. There was a comment earlier about, you know, that with sports or what have you. So whenever we hear reports of that, we contact SEER. They've been quite responsive to us, and, you know, they're well aware of the requirements and are addressing that with drivers as needed. So I wanted you to know what we're doing and why we're doing it. And it's not something I ever brought to this committee, or either this board or the reopening committee. You know, it was one of those operational decisions that I reviewed research, talked to people, and then figured out how we would handle this. So do you have any questions? Or Brent, do you have anything that you think should be added to that?
No, I think you put everything out there.
So of course I have to drag the meeting on, right? That's what I'm here for, isn't that right? I was one of the ones that had, you know, spoke up about this because I did and still do have a concern about the sports busing, where I think we've gotten away from that piece where we had asked students and parents to drive, and now it's just parents. But I still believe wholeheartedly that we should be putting the full team on a bus, and we could be doing the same thing all the other districts are doing, because that is what they're doing, one per seat. And on if it does impact the elementary school, I also do feel pretty strongly that the height of those seats, I agree. I thought as an adult, even often if you're sitting there, you're like eye level with the seat in front of you, like you can see it, but you could certainly reach someone. But it just seems like I feel buried in those seats. But it's been a while, I guess. So I think that's something we could certainly do as well, because it's just in accordance with everyone else in the region is doing the same thing. So and again, back to the sporting thing, I just think we got away from it, but it was in my mind, no question, a much bigger liability having students driving after a long day and playing sports and all that. And I shared that with you, but I wanted to share it here as well on why.
Yeah, we did
concerned with
move away from that. And one thing we did do to solve the issue is we've also, where we have teens, if we don't have enough parents, we're looking at, sometimes there's a coach that might take their vehicle and drive a player or two in the vehicle. And then if there are families who pod together and, spend a lot of time together out of school, we're treating them like siblings if we have a space issue and need to solve that space issue. So, I think like every decision in this, there's certainly lots of ways to look at it. And, with all of it, I try to make decisions that I think I can justify. And this is a decision that I felt like would be hard for me to justify following what other people are doing. And I just think, I had to apply my own judgment to that. And that's what I did with this. So that's why, we've taken the approach we took with busing. It's shocking how close the seats are. I mean, I think buses have changed a little over the years in terms of spacing, and they've put seats a lot closer together, and they're not as tall as they used to be. I know what you're talking about. I remember feeling like, I couldn't see, in front of me, but you can. The bus seats are not as high as maybe I once remembered them to be, or maybe I was shorter. I don't know. But, I just am trying to make decisions that I feel like I can sleep at night feeling good about. And that's what I did with this one. So when I questioned a couple of my colleagues, they acknowledged that it doesn't feel great, but it's what they had to do to reopen. So I didn't feel like I had to do that to reopen in every case. So I made the decision that I felt safest with. Any other questions or directions on this?
No, I think when you shared, the information, particularly that measurement that it was 30 inches, I was just assuming it was going to be much bigger than that. I thought that we'd be able to get more distance spreading them out. And so that certainly gave me cause for concern too. So my enthusiasm for kind of following what some of the other districts are doing decreased at that point. So I think for now, given the fact that this hasn't caused too many issues, right? And the ones that have come up, you've been able to solve. I think for now we're in the right spot. I do think, and I think it's great to hear that if we take, kind of a first, the first proposed step towards maybe bringing more people back in, that it would still not be an issue. I do think that if we're fortunate enough, the conditions still warrant it, and we continue to move down the path of more students coming in, then this is going to be something we're really going to have to take a hard look at. So for now, I think we're in a good spot on that, and we'll see going forward. I did have a question on, you mentioned the possibility of using some of this funding that we ridiculously have to expend by December 30th to possibly buy more vans or something to transport students. Would we be looking at using current staff maybe to transport? And if not, would that also then entail maybe hiring someone, additional drivers, or what's I'm sure you're just starting to think about this, but what are you thinking on that?
Well, I haven't really considered much beyond using the van for food service delivery, and then as needed to transport, and whoever's, the person trying to transport a child would be the driver. It's a good thing about a van that it doesn't require special licensure. But it might be that we decide we need to hire a driver or add more hours to someone's day to do a run with the van, to do some special transportation. I know it provides us some opportunities we've really never had before. So I would see it more of maybe paying some staff some more hours than hiring a whole additional person. I'm not using this if you need to. Do you want to trade, or you? Sorry, we're having power issues here. So yeah, I agree, Mark, that, I think we've been able to take obviously a more cautious approach, and we'd have to, might have to examine that and problem solve around what we might be able to do. I noticed that one district who I think runs their own transportation bought a minibus with this money. It's something we haven't considered until I saw that today. So, you know, being able to get one is kind of a question. I think that minibuses don't require the same licensure as buses, but they might require something in between. I'd have to have Brent check on that to see if they require like a Class B or something.
Thank you.
Nope, I see someone giving me my answer that you do not need a special license. Any other questions or comments about busing?
You're muted.
Wasn't there an issue with the minibus and the insurance as to why we couldn't do it before?
Not minibuses, it's the 15 passenger vans that are the problem.
Okay.
I think that might apply to the minibuses too. It's a number of occupants.
Yeah, I think it does.
Legally, I don't think you need the commercial license, but from the insurance point of view, you need the commercial license, I think is what we ended up at last time.
Yeah, because I don't think we could get a minibus instead of the mini. I think that's why we had to go with the minivan. And in regards to, I'm sorry, go ahead, Aaron.
I don't know, it just says the federal law requires a commercial license carrying 16 passengers, including the driver. So I don't, that's on like some.
Yeah, I don't think minibuses, I think they might be up to 15 or so. Anyway, this is something we're exploring. We're going to look at it and see if it's something that, you know, can give us more solutions. I'm not really fond of getting in the minibus business. I would rather maybe have more vans, but if we decide that's a problem that or a potential solve, so we're going to look at it.
Hey, quick question. I can't imagine we can fit many in a minivan with the social distancing either, right? Maybe 3?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Unless they're from the same family, then you can, you know, if you just need to get a family home, maybe.
Yeah. I can see us, you know, transporting just a couple of kids sometimes in the van right now. But ultimately, you know, we could use the van for 6 kids or, you know, 5 or 6. But for right now, I think 2 would probably be where we would try to keep it, maybe 3, unless if it's family members. Any other questions about busing? Okay. Sorry, I have to go back to my list. So before I didn't list these in the order I really wanted to talk about them. So I'm going to jump to the COVID positive protocols. Lisa Smith mentioned this in her report. You know, we were asking all summer and struggling through some questions, and this is one of those that this document first came out at the end of August, and it's the standard operating procedures for investigation of COVID-19 in K through 12 schools. It came out in draft form, and so we were kind of waiting to see, is this going to become public? It really wasn't given much attention. We kind of happened upon it and started looking through it and said, wow, this is really an important document. Let's find out more about this. And so Lisa and Karen and I started looking at it, and Diane got involved a bit with it to just think through some elements. We talked with our admin team and Brent a bit about it, and have talked to a local district who had to implement this last week. And you know, now that we have state guidance on what we need to do in the event of a positive case, I'm recommending to you that this is what we adopt as our procedure and protocol for that. I think it's, you know, as contemplated, all the things that need to be contemplated, and you can see it's dynamic. They've changed it, 6 times since they developed this, and are learning, you know, as they go. But the table on page, 6 is probably the best place to look for a summary. It kind of gives an overview of what the typical response would be for positive cases. And in talking with the superintendent locally who had to use this week, he said it really kind of helped guide everything, and that the CDC really did kind of walk them through and help with decisions and notification kind of protocols. So you can see that for 1 or 2 cases, it has a recommendation on if the case is isolated to a single classroom or if the cases are across multiple classrooms and what the response would be. We've thought through kind of in our schools what that would mean in each school, and basically based on footprint, you know, ASA's in the best shape, the middle school's in the worst shape, and the high school's kind of in between in terms of footprint, in terms of staffing, I guess I should say. In terms of students, the middle and high school might be about on even ground there. So, you know, one of the issues for us might be if we had a positive case in the middle or high school, you can see that it's not saying there's an automatic closure. It's saying it depends on, you know, the level of how many cohorts are involved. Those are the students and staff who would need to test and isolate or quarantine. I think for us, our issue might be if we have a student in the middle school, it would likely involve at least seven staff members having to quarantine, and it might cause us to have to go remote just by virtue of that. So those are some of the things we've been talking about. Busing is also contemplated in here. So Brent's been working with SEER to try to get some more refined information about bus routes. And so we can easily go to a document and know who was on the bus for how long with which students, because there's some, you know, definitions of close contact is 15 minutes in an enclosed space with the individual. So if you're on a bus for 15 or more minutes with someone who tests positive, then you are a close contact. But if you got on the bus and only had 5-minute ride to the school, then you're not considered a close contact according to these guidelines. So that's what we're trying to refine so that when we have a case, we have information readily available to be able to work with the CDC and make decisions. I think that was one of our concerns this summer around contact tracing. And I think our staff has done a great job in working on having systems in place for that. So, you know, basically this kind of outlines what we would do and how we would notify. They even give sample letters, as you can see, that we would use. The outbreak definition is 3 or more related cases within confirmed cases from different households in a 14-day period. So those are the, if it's in a single classroom, kind of the automatic closure, but if it's across multiple classrooms, pods, those are likely the ones where we're going to have to do a school-wide closure under the guidance of the CDC. So, you know, I would have liked to have had this sooner, but I'm glad to have it now. And so what I wanted to do tonight is share this with you, and then we will update our school handbooks and just inform families of this new protocol. And, you know, people can take a look at it if they want to know more. Did you have any questions or comments about this? Okay.
No, I mean, it's like you say, better late than never, but it's
Right.
good to have state guidance instead of be making it up on our own.
I think one of the things that, you know, Karen Martin's been really, you know, plugged into the school nurse network is a really important piece of this. And Emily Poland, who's the Department of Ed school nurse liaison, is the key liaison from the Department of Ed to CDC in the cases of positive COVID cases in schools. And so either Karen or myself would be the first to be notified if we learned of the case through the CDC. I think, you know, we would likely learn it from the family or from the individual, but it can come from either way. But there's just some clear communication protocols that make sure that the loop is closed and we aren't leaving out critical partners in the conversation when that happens. So, you know, I think that it's a great guidance document, and it's something that, you know, we're still kind of combing through and getting to know as they do updates, and then making sure that we have systems in place to be able to use this and not be, you know, looking around for information that we didn't know we needed to have. So that's part of the work we're engaged in. And I think we, you know, we put this in the board docs tonight. So if people on the call want to take a look at that, but again, I think, you know, we'll put it on our COVID-19 resource page and just point people to that if they want to learn more about this. And, you know, one of the things that's really tricky with this is confidentiality. It's just super important, and it's never going to satisfy people the amount of information they're able to find out if they are a close contact, but it's just really important that we maintain confidentiality through the process of, you know, if we have a positive case. And so I just want to say that out loud again, because it'll be a struggle when we have that first case, and people, you know, will have a desire to know more than really we're able to tell them.
Yeah, I think that's probably a key point. I mean, it's sort of the bedrock of the mandatory reporting system in this country that you have to report, but you do have privacy around these communicable diseases. And so that does mean, you know, my kid's in a school and I can't find out, you know, which room, or, you know, sometimes you can find the room, but you're not going to, like you say, you're not going to find out as much as you want to know, but that's actually state law, and that's actually there for a good reason of encouraging people to come forward by protecting their privacy. So it's probably good for people to start getting their head around that, you know, it's going to be handled responsibly in full consultation with the CDC, and anything you need to know, you'll find out. But it's not going to be everything. People in the town of Orono, where the rumor mill works very quickly, it's not going to be that kind of level of information.
Yeah. Related to that, we learned late last week that districts in Maine will have the opportunity to opt into obtaining some tests, some rapid point of care rapid response testing. We're having a meeting tomorrow and then another the next day to really contemplate this and decide how and if we want to opt into this. So we're meeting, you know, Karen's involved in that discussion, Lisa, Brian, Rob Wheeler, and Diane Breen we're all kind of engaging in that conversation to decide. I think it can help us in some ways, kind of around some of what we were just talking about, but it's also tricky in some other ways. So we're just thinking through kind of advantages, disadvantages, and you know, I think it's new ground for us to consider, but you know, I think in terms of making this available and accessible to people, it's an important thing for districts to consider. And we'll bring back more information when we have a little more information and can share with you all and just the school community about this. So that's kind of hot off the press news. So want to turn to our discussion of next steps. I think, you know, from my correspondence with the school community, felt like it was time to engage in a discussion about next steps. And in doing that, wanted to collect some information on a variety of fronts. So some of that is, you know, looking at our class enrollments and comparing them to, you know, this attendance data we showed you, but also kind of at the middle and high school in particular, class by class enrollments, looking back at that room analysis sheet again, kind of looking at some of the rooms against that. And I think I've used my measuring tape more than I've ever used a measuring tape in my life this year in this work. I get teased by some member of our admin team about that who's on this call tonight. I love my measuring tape and we've used it a lot. The survey data that we collected, I've shared with you. And, you know, I have to say that it's really, maybe you had the same experience. it's hard to read the survey results because it just underscores how people are struggling. I mean, it just, you know, my heart kind of aches when I read how much people are struggling during this time. So I just have to acknowledge, first of all, you know, this is hard from every angle, what we're going through right now. And I really wish that I didn't feel like we had to bring up change and think about this, but I don't feel right not talking about what's next. I think we have to consider that. But at the same time, I just have to say that, you know, I recognize that it causes a lot of stress and anxiety for people. So my goal in this is to just be transparent and say, you know, look, we have to think about, are we in the right lane? And what are the lanes to the left and right of us? And when does it make sense to change lanes? And if we're looking at changing lanes in one direction, I think we have a really robust system in place for most grades, and we're working on it for another set of grades. That's the remote. I think we're really robust with that lane, except for K2. That's still something we need to develop. And we really, I think, know what our yellow lane is. I don't think we know a lot about our green lane. And Reg was saying this when we were talking, and I remember us saying this, that when we were engaged in work this summer, we talked about, you know, we know what red is and we know what green is. Yellow's hard. We got to really figure out yellow. And what we've learned is yellow was not easy, and it was a lot to figure out. But green is not easy. Green does not mean life goes back to normal as we know it. Green does not mean that, you know, we all take off our masks and go back to normal every day. I think if we're at that, we don't have a rating system anymore. We're not worried about green, yellow, red. We're just, you know, past this pandemic time we're in. So I think green is a lot more complicated than we gave it credit for when we were working this summer. And that's something that's really been revealed to me as we've started this discussion about, well, what does a next step look like? So that's why I think it's really important as a school community that we engage in this. As stressful and difficult as it is, I think we have to think about it. And, you know, I just want to assure people that I'm not thinking about this, you know, without great care and consideration. And I think it's actually something that we, I feel that it's absolutely essential that we consider this and determine, as of where we are, what next steps might be if we were to take them. Because I think not knowing it and having to kind of bring up this is like ripping a Band-Aid off every, you know, 4 to 6 weeks when we need to reassess things. And I think, you know, I just want people to understand that it's going to be a year where we have to constantly reassess. We're not going to be able to stay status quo without looking at, is this the right place to be, almost constantly. So that's why I've engaged us in this. And I've asked people, you know, who's asking us to do this and why are we having to do this? And I'll raise my hand. It's me. I felt like we needed to do this. So if you want to get mad at someone, get mad at me for saying we need to talk about this and we need to figure this out, because I can't answer the question what green looks like for our district. And so I think we need to figure out the answer to that. So the survey data, we've shared some summary data with the public. We've shared data with the board. We've been looking at this data, and I would say in summary that the data just from where I sit and what I see, from families, shows kind of a majority of families prefer to be full in person at this, you know, over the next month to 2 months. That's what the data shows to me. But it also shows that it's not altogether different than the survey data that we gathered in early August, late July. It doesn't look too different. I mean, there's some subtle differences, but there's some similar trends to the data. There were, you know, we didn't have 100% response rate on this one. We had a higher response rate in the summer because it was kind of declaring what you're going to do. And this was more like, tell us what you think. But we feel like it's a very representative sample at every level. You know, there's some grade levels, like if you look at like third grade, 95% of respondents, or it might be 97, sorry, I don't have that sheet in front of me, 5% of respondents responded, you know, preferring full in-person. And then, you know, the lowest grade level was 11th in terms of saying that that's their preference at 49. So that's kind of the range of the family responses. A low grade level 11 of 49% preferring full in-person, a high in third grade of 95, and then kind of in between there. It also continues to be true that the way to get the most kids in the building attending in some form in person is through hybrid. I mean, the rates of people who say they would attend in person is consistently higher, and in some places much higher under if we were still in hybrid. So that was true this summer, and it continues to be true. I would say that the age level of the learner probably impacts, those third grade numbers, and to some degree the fourth and fifth grade numbers of, and we see it in middle school. I think there's more of a kind of feeling that high school learners can manage remote learning more independently and successfully. We have a higher number of students opting for remote there, and a higher number of students wanting to potentially continue with remote there than we have at the other schools. But I think, what I read in comments is that for those, their parents on the bubble, right? That depending on where we go next, really with their comfort decides which direction they go. And I just put together some, under the people who said we prefer hybrid, I think there was one person out of the whole set that this was not true for, but for everyone else, if they said they would attend in person and hybrid, if they said they would attend full in person, they would also attend hybrid. I think there was one person that wouldn't do that. They either want full in person or they want full remote. Everyone else said, if I, am comfortable full in person, I'm also comfortable in hybrid. The opposite, though, is not true. So there were, a higher number of families who said I prefer full in person. And those families were the ones I was really curious about, because those are the families that are the bubble families, the ones who said I would attend in hybrid, but didn't say I would attend in full in person. So in, the elementary school, we have about 11 families in that bubble. And of the 11, 5 of them said no, and the other 6 are undecided. So, you kind of have a split, and this summer when we were looking at data, we were thinking, okay, how many of those maybes or undecideds are going to go which direction? And so, at ASA, that group is about 50-50. In the middle school, it's close to 50-50. It's, 10 of those individuals said, no, I wouldn't. 8 are still uncertain. So, we have that group about 50-50. At the high school, there were a lot more uncertains than absolute no's. So there's probably a higher degree of variability at the high school. So I just found that interesting because that's kind of a group that, depending on where we head next, it might impact our remote numbers going up. But I also saw, just with our opening of school, that, some families weren't overly comfortable when we changed second and sixth grade to be full in person as opposed to hybrid. I think for the most part, we didn't lose too many families to remote. It might feel different now to families. But I think once families got in and saw how it was working, most families stayed with the in-person instruction. So, you know, the parent data to me is following the pattern that we've seen from the start. Do you want to talk about parent data or kind of jump over and summarize staff data?
I think, yeah, go ahead with the staff data. I think maybe it makes sense for the board weigh in just when we get to the point of
Yeah.
weighing everything all together.
Yeah, you know, the staff data, if I had to summarize it, was probably opposite the parent data. There was a lot more hesitance and discomfort with changing from where we are now overall. And we asked questions a little differently because, you know, we felt like we needed different information from staff than we were asking from families in terms of staff thinking about, you know, what are the ways that we might take next steps and having them react to that. So you can see the data both in overall and then by school. You know, the most favorable response came from the question around, you know, people feeling like bringing small cohorts of students to attend more in-person based on need received, you know, the most favorable and a support in terms of across all schools. And then the next most favorable was bringing back grade levels gradually one at a time for more in-person days. The least favorable was kind of a full in-person return for all grades, no hybrid. So kind of that, you know, bring all back quickly, which I'm not surprised that received, but, you know, we tried to put a full range of options out for people to react to. And then in general, I would say, you know, the lowest response for the middle school was that kind of having 3 lanes opened at once was not met with support there. And I think that matches what I would think would be the case with those learners. That would be a challenging juggle. And then the high school's lowest response was that full in-person. Actually, the middle school's lowest response was the full in-person. But other than that one question that was low across the board, the high school's lowest support was for the modifying Wednesdays to be a rotating in-person day. And then ASA's lowest response was the kind of the 3-lane option as well, of keeping 3 lanes open at one time. You know, we asked some other questions here to try to glean some additional information about health and safety, and you can see that people's priorities for as we are considering next steps, these are the top 3 things that they want us to keep in mind and continue to keep in strong focus. Social distancing during transitions was a top response, cleaning regimens maintained, and continued ventilation optimization. And then, you know, we had a couple of different areas where people could write comments. So I kind of summarized some of the most commonly kind of reported comments or added comments here. You know, time, we talked about, I mentioned in an email I shared with you that, you know, time is really the major stressor that people are struggling with right now. You know, it's brand new work. It feels like you're a beginning teacher all over again, on top of kind of all of the nuances that Brian, you know, talked about with tech struggles and you know, managing all the protocols and the cleaning of the desks, and, you know, could just go on and on, that it just, time is a real struggle. And, you know, the comment of, we heard this in public comment, you know, we're doing well, too soon to make an adjustment, why fix something that's not broken? And then feeling like we're just getting our footing, why are we considering a change already? Concerns about the upcoming winter season and ventilation, and concerns about flu season. We saw some of those comments actually across both surveys, those last 2. Actually, those last 3, 4. Time wasn't something that parents talked about, but the other probably 4 were. So those were kind of the big takeaways from the staff survey. You know, I can tell you that we have to figure out how to solve this time stressor in some way. I don't know that we're going to solve it. We have to, I feel like we have to figure out a way to help with that in some way. So we'll talk about that in a little while. You know, I think I addressed some of this other as I opened up this conversation, and that, you know, I think that, you know, 5.5, 6 weeks into the school year, it's time to talk about where are we, and are we ready to shift, and what do conditions say about where we are. And I think that the feeling that we shouldn't be contemplating change is something that I just want to again say out loud, is we do not have a school year that we can say we're going to stay the same for, you know, long periods of time. It's just not the reality of this year. And I know that's stressful and difficult and doesn't make any of the stressors easier. But I don't want for people to misunderstand where I feel like we are. And so, you know, there are lots of concerns that people have in the staff realm, but I also would say that, you know, I also hear from staff that, you know, I'll do anything to have kids back in person. It's, you know, my kids really need to be in person. Certain grade levels more than others. And, you know, I think that there are some places where it seems like there's an easier path to accomplish that than others. And that's what I want us to kind of begin to think through and talk about. But first, I thought we should kind of just debrief the summary data and see if you had any other observations or comments about it.
I mean, I think you summarized it pretty accurately. What I take away is majority of parents, I guess a majority of all survey respondents really feel like getting back to full is what they want to do, but there's a substantial minority among parents. You know, there's about 15% remote, and there's another 15% that going full is not something they want to do. It's hard to predict exactly how many are really going to pull their kids into remote, but you know, it's a non-trivial number that going to full, it's just not true that for those people going to full is not costing them anything. Even if you give them the choice of letting their kids go hybrid, most of these people want to stay hybrid because they feel like it's safer and reduces numbers in the school. It's not. There might be a couple people who choose to stay hybrid because of schedules or kids' personalities or something. But so there's a real minority that doesn't want to go to full, and there's a very real majority of teachers that don't want to go to full. So this is kind of a classic. In the end, I don't think this is a public vote. I think it comes down to the administrators and the board making the decision they feel is right, balancing education and health. But this is kind of a very classic situation of majority rule, minority rights being in pretty strong opposition to each other. And no easy answer to that, and we'll talk in a minute about directions and possible approaches. But I think it's really important to recognize both of those things. The majority of parents want their kids back full time, and obviously on some level feel it's safe to do so. But there's a real minority among parents and also among teachers that don't want to do that. So I think it's really important as a board that we listen to both of those groups. Again, not getting to where we should go or what we should do, but I think it's really important that we keep in mind that, and we're not, you know, and the other thing is this is, the reason being on the board sometimes is not very fun, but we're not going to be able to make all those groups happy. There is no magic compromise that solves all of those problems. So I just think it's important to kind of pause and recognize all those groups have very valid opinions, and all those opinions are out there, and this is where we have to bring it all together in some way that makes the most sense and makes the most people getting what they need out of this. That's what I took out of the survey.
I think I'd agree with Brian's characterization of this. I mean, there's obviously many different perspectives here. They're all important to acknowledge and to take into consideration as we try and work through what these next steps are. I also want to applaud Meredith for kind of pushing us to start this conversation, right? I think she's absolutely right that this is not a year where we kind of set it and forget it. We obviously knew that coming in, but this isn't going to be the last time we're going to do this, right? I assume that we're going to be having multiple conversations over the course of the year, and sometimes we'll be considering moving in one direction, and other times, hopefully not, but the reality tells us the other times we'll probably be considering moving in the opposite direction. So I think it's good, and I appreciate that she's got us started on this. I also think, Brian's point about, kind of majority versus minority here is important to keep in mind. There is no doubt that the parent survey data in particular show that not only are they majorities of parents that want their students back full-time as their preferred model, but they're pretty strong majorities. I mean, we're talking about 3/4 at ASA and almost 2/3 at both the middle school and the high school. And so those are not just majorities, those are super majorities, however you want to define the term. That being said, 25% or 33-34% of people who would prefer kind of the remote or the hybrid are not insignificant numbers either. So I think we need to make sure that we have all of those different perspectives in mind as we kind of work forward with what we're doing. There is, as Brian said, no one decision here that's gonna make everybody happy. That goes for both parents and for staff as well. I think this is another example of where Meredith's kind of advice in the summer and kind of urging in the summer of, let's kind of proceed gradually, walk before we run is probably the right move, right? Whatever we're going to do, in addition to getting there kind of thoughtfully and carefully and looking at all the angles, I think an incremental approach is probably the best approach. And that allows us to kind of get our feet wet, see how it's going, gather data, reassess. And again, I think that process is going to be ongoing really over the course of the entire school year. So I guess that's what I would say at the outset of trying to make what our next step's going to be.
I had a couple observations. I looked at the graphs first before I looked at the raw data, and it was so overwhelming, people saying I want to go back full time. But I found it interesting when I looked at the raw data that a lot of the comments that people put with yes, I want to send my kids full time was kind of like also under the assumption that we'll be following the same. No, not everybody was like that, but there were a lot of comments that were saying under the assumption that we would be social distancing and masks and still maintaining this same protocols that we had, which kind of tempered that information for me. And then another thing that I think sort of plays into the ASA data is this, now that we're going to be offering this daycare option, because I think that's what makes really hard for a lot of the elementary school parents to have kids home certain days of the week and at school certain days of the week, and they're trying to figure out, work in that. I think that would play into that a lot now that we're hopefully going to be able to offer that option soon. So I think that would be interesting. I don't know how that would affect the numbers that we got back. Yeah.
Leo, Jake, you don't have to weigh in now. We're going to have another round after we get a recommendation of what to do going forward. But if you want to weigh in now.
I agree with all the previous comments here. I do want to also, I guess it's already been said, but I do appreciate, Meredith, your transparency and the fact that you are continuing to look forward. I agree that this work absolutely has to be done. So I understand people are hesitant and concerned, but I do think from being on the summer committee as well, I mean, this was the plan from the beginning, that the one thing we knew is that there's going to be constant change and we're going to have to be flexible. So I think that's all we're doing here. So I appreciate that you have initiated this and appreciate the transparency that you've provided in putting this out. So
No, I really don't have much to add to what was already said, but one thing that is constant is that there's going to be change, right? So I think we're going down the right path as far as continuing to reassess where we're at, what the needs and desires of staffs and parents are, and then go from there. And that's what we're doing.
Can I chime in one more time? Sorry, I missed something. I just wanted to go with, I think it's really important that we put together a plan and have sort of this green light, because I think that we should have what that is, because I think the important part, especially for the staff, is to figure out how to make this so that we can, like Mark was saying, have it incremental and ease people into it, instead of just all of a sudden saying, all right, we're totally switching a model on them, which I think is where a lot of the worry comes from, because you're developed a whole system one way and then to try to quick change to something else. I think it's important to have a plan, but I also think we need to be watching. I think one of the things that made me a little nervous was this next step is kind of like, we're obviously going to be at a green light, which I think kind of threw me off right from the beginning, when it's actually making a plan so that we have a plan no matter which way it goes.
So we've had some discussion here at the board level about this green, yellow, red system, and there was a little explanation that came out. I shared that with you in the board folder, and there was a link on there you could go to read a little bit more. And if you haven't found that link and gone to it, it might satisfy some of what you're looking for, but it's still kind of qualitative in parts if you read that. But I think it's important to note that we've been green for the opening of school. We did have the 1 week where after the Millinocket outbreak, Penobscot County was on the kind of watch list, but we remained green. And that was actually a good exercise for us to think about, okay, so what would we change if our designation went to yellow? And we realized that we had to get some things figured out. So, along the way, we learned things when kind of a nuance gets thrown at us. And that was one of those times where we realized, we don't have hybrid cohort set up for pre-K to 2 and 6th grade. We need to do that so that if we had to go full yellow, or we decided that was the right move, we need to have that ready. So in thinking about, this other direction, that's part of what, this is about as well. Leo shared some interesting data that I put in the folder because I found it to be really interesting, the CDC data that compared August and September. And, I feel like it's what's contributing to the fact that we've remained green to, show that we've had, 27 new cases?
Total of 27 cases in Penobscot County for the month of September.
Right.
Yep.
And
Total.
I
And
think
zero hospitalizations, I think. So
right,
those are just positive test results, which, so presumably, obviously nobody's sick enough to be in the hospital.
Yeah. And I think it's defying what I think a lot of us thought could happen with the university coming back, right? And certainly that was something that expressed in our local community that there were, very well-founded concerns around. And we hope to be able to get in some time in person in the event that had an impact that we might have to react to. So, so far we haven't seen that county-wide impact from that or from other kind of widespread cases. And I would consider it to be a success that that the only one I've heard about locally impacting a school was one school in our county. I think that's a success. I don't think it's a sign of failure or bad things to come. I think that's actually a lot more positive than I expected. So I think sometimes it's depending on your perspective and how, you're considering the data. And I guess my philosophy with this is personally, we need to follow the guidance the state has given. And as I've shown on buses, I've been on the end of the spectrum of being more cautious maybe than some others. And I do think there comes a time when you look at what's the guidance that we've been given, and do we stay where we are or do we adjust that in places? And so one of the things that I've been thinking about is distancing. And I think that's a place where if we're going to make a move to have more students attending in person, that we wanted to assess. So what would it take to have, this grade level or that grade level attending full in person? And so we've done some just updated measurements and looking at that kind of data. And for the most part, we can say that we're in good shape, and that's partly because of our small class sizes. When we compare ourselves to other surrounding districts, it's been kind of a real priority for this district to maintain smaller class sizes. And so in this kind of pandemic situation where we need social distance, it works to our favor in that regard as well. So for the most part, except for a few places, we found that that between 4.5 and 6 feet spacing can accommodate the vast majority of the spaces that we're looking at adding students back in a first phase. It does accomplish what we're looking at for a first phase. But there are some spaces that we'll have to problem solve around beyond some of the things that we're thinking about first. And some of that is, like in the middle and high school where you have, schedule constraints where it pushes, a lot of students into this section and less students into this section, and it's hard to solve that. We might have to just get creative with moving some classes around or changing some schedules. But again, that's some problem solving for kind of next steps. But I think the other thing that we have to look at are transition times. Transition times is another area where I think it's the most challenging. I think it's more challenging than the seats in fitting in the right number of seats in classrooms. The transition times are probably the harder of those two to solve, particularly in the middle and high school, but at ASA as well, with some constraints there that we have with construction. But it's to a lesser degree at ASA than it is up here. Although their before school challenge is a little different. It's all three buildings. I'll just stop saying it's different. It's all three buildings have challenges with transitions. And with transitions, I also mean lunch. That's kind of a congregate time of day in most schools. So it's before school, class changes, lunchtime, and dismissal. But given all of that, we think that there are some natural next steps. And what I guess when I say we, as the admin team's been looking at this and considering what seems to make sense is, looking at what's the next grade in ASA and OMS, kind of in the progression of grades that are already full in person. And that's 3rd grade at ASA and 7th grade at OMS. And those grade levels are, for different reasons, we think the next grade in each building that we are recommending be in the first phase of a gradual change. In 3rd grade, as you saw in the numbers there, there are 35 students total in that grade level. They are across 2 classrooms though. We reduced a classroom at that grade level, and you saw the numbers of remote. So in that grade level, it would probably be around 16 students per class. And I'm looking at Kristen to see if she's nodding yes or no, if I'm getting that number wrong. And so in that grade level, I think it was 5 feet spacing that gets us to that number in 3rd grade. With 7th grade, you saw those numbers. It's another small class overall, 39 students in that grade. And it's hard to know what remote students are going to do. I mean, we may have some remote students come back. We may have some students go to remote, but just considering kind of, maybe the largest level, that would be moving in only one classroom where we have to go to 5 foot spacing. The rest of them can remain at 6 foot spacing. And in each of those cases, for 3rd grade and 7th grade, the net impact to the overall school load is just 16 students. So in third grade, to add, you know, the rest of the students attending full in person, you add 16 students to the building load each day. And the same in the 7th grade. And that is partly why we feel like, in addition to the things we just said, we feel like that is a first step that seems to feel comfortable. That's a very incremental change, and begins to move, you know, another step to full in person. The other part of thinking about that at the middle school, though, is we feel like we'll have to change to 2 lunches. It's something that the middle schools, you know, has kind of on the back burner, ready to do if needed. And I believe Richard feels like if we brought back 7th grade full in person, that we would need to make that change to a 2 lunch system. OHS, it's less clear to us tonight what the exact next step is. We really feel like we need some more time with that. For many reasons. The high school is different on a number of levels. One of the primary differences at the high school is there's a lot less podding. I know it doesn't seem like the middle school pods, but they pod by grade level. I don't think there's any class that a student has with a student from another grade. It maybe music. Music, I think, is the only class where they cross grade levels in classes. So there's a natural podding that happens there. And at the high school, there's not. So it becomes it's more complex to think about. They have, you know, changed their schedule so they only have 4 regroupings, but those regroupings could, you know, be with students from other grade levels during time. So there's just some complications there we need to think a little more through. When we look at the survey data and we compare that against the groups that we feel would be kind of the first that we should consider bringing back, they're the exact groups that were the highest respondents in wanting to come back among families. So it was the freshman group and then the senior group. To us, those are the 2 groups that should be considered in the conversation about what makes sense as to the highest priority to consider for a first phase. And so, and I think that, you know, Reg and Sam have talked about, you know, they're really kind of different reasons to consider those groups. And we really need some more time to think through that with staff. And to think about also, you know, with the high school, because it just feels like such a different animal when we're thinking about adding things. We need to think through kind of a big picture approach with the high school. And, you know, have just been kind of, you know, thinking through alternatives, and there are so many alternatives to think about. I think that the thing that's the biggest problem to solve at the high school is thinking about transitions and thinking about, you know, that time of day and those times of day and how to solve kind of the distancing and crowding issues that we would face with if we got back to kind of 380 students are back. That's a down the road issue. But, you know, I think thinking about down the road kind of also impacts maybe the journey along the way, and thinking about kind of what's our plan for the high school. And so I think that's something that Reg and Sam and the high school team need to think through a little more. It's a little more contained at the other schools, that, you know, bringing back 7th grade, it impacts teachers because we have teachers that cross grade levels a lot at the middle school, and then at ASTA you have specialists who cross. But for the students, they really travel in these pods, and so it just feels a lot more contained as we kind of make a decision to, okay, let's bring back this group, and they're going to be in these spaces with these teachers, and this is the footprint. So for that reason, I think we just need a little more time to think about the high school. But my plan tonight was to kind of bring your thinking, to listen to your response to it, to give the community a chance to hear our thinking, and then to kind of finalize and make a decision in the next meeting. It'll give us some more time to kind of work through the high school and what our thinking about a next step would be. I think tentatively what we're thinking about is that grading period that Deb mentioned when she commented earlier. The quarter change, although it doesn't mean anything at ASA, it's kind of a landmark, a grading period landmark, and it's timing wise, it gives us about 3.5, almost 4 weeks from now to plan to make a change. So it feels like it would give us enough time to plan, and also enough time to give some people some notice to think about a change. We want to plan beyond the first phase, but I think, the first step is to figure out a phase 1, and then to keep the ball rolling to literally think about the other phases, so that we have what a getting to green looks like in our district. What is green look like for each school and then for the district? So, that's what we hope to be able to continue discussions around, problem solve, and develop. The other part of kind of the recommendation I have tonight is around the time issue with staff, and the real struggle that everyone's having around that. And so, one of the ways that we're thinking about that is to request one early release per month that is just about that. We don't have many early releases left in our schedule. We've kind of phased them out. We have one this month that we use for professional development for the mandated trainings that we do. So that one's already kind of earmarked for that purpose. But our staff says, we need help to figure things out, but we have a PD day coming up this Friday, and we're using it, well, with lots of good, valuable learning, but it's just not enough. And people are just feeling like, I had one teacher in the survey say, I'm like the duck. On the surface, it looks great. I'm trying to hold it together so everyone doesn't think I'm losing it, but underneath, they can, if they looked underneath, they would see how hard I'm having to paddle to keep going forward. And I think that's what I'm trying to find some ways to help address. It's hard for us to find subs to give people release time to work, because, we're having, people who have to quarantine, or people who are following the symptom checker who stay home when normally, they would come into work. But they're doing what we've asked them to do. And so we don't really have the ability to use subs to give people release time in a way that we might in a normal year. So I've talked a lot. The admin team, can certainly chime in if you have questions, or if admin team feels like there's something I missed. But I want to kind of open it up to the board and the admin team if there are questions or other elements to add.
Meredith, I guess just going back to the time for the teachers, is it something that can be, the work that they're really struggling with in the time management, is it something that's like a chunk of time, once a month does, or is it more of like an everyday, period to period kind of thing?
Sorry, I'm muted. I think people are struggling day in, day out, right? It's an ongoing challenge. And I think, in a recommendation, I'm trying to find a way to give extra time without, creating more of a problem by having a solve that creates a new challenge for them and for us. So, but I don't think it's not just once a month they find they need time. It's every day. It's the cumulative effect of it all.
I'm sure it's a more is better kind of thing. It's just kind of, yeah, how far can we go? So, I mean, I like your point. I think every major decision we take as a board, whether it's eliminating positions, budgets, we have always traditionally stretched it across 2 board meetings so that there's time for us to deliberate, time for the community, including the staff and the parents, to understand what's happening and respond and weigh in. And certainly I think on something as consequential as this, I think that's a very good idea that we take this decision over 2 weeks, and that puts us right on schedule for that natural transition point in early November. So I fully support that approach. My thoughts, 6 months ago, I did not have a philosophy about how to run an organization in COVID, but at this point I now have a philosophy. It's about the numbers in the community. It's about maintaining safety for when COVID does show up in the building, because it will show up at some point, I'm certain. I hope it doesn't, but I'm certain it will at some point. So it's about the belt and the suspenders. It's about having low numbers in the community and maintaining safety in the building. And I think I've really learned from Meredith's wisdom too. It is about, at least when we're expanding, recognizing what a complex institution schools are, right? We do everything from feeding kids to taking care of sick kids to moving kids between multiple subjects. And so really not over assuming our ability to be the Soviet planning organization and to plan everything out in advance and just slap down the 500-page plan and execute it. We have to, as an organization, we have to be a little bit organic and incremental. So those are my 3 guiding principles. I do take the parent surveys seriously. I take the teacher surveys seriously. On some level, I think I agree with all of the opinions that are expressed there. I do think, going back to the first point, the numbers are as good as they're going to get, at least until we get a vaccine. The 2 numbers that a lot of scientists look at, one is the positive daily or weekly COVID rates. And Penobscot County is at, or it's just ticked up in the last couple of days, so it's a little hard to say what the right number is, but it's right around 1 in 100,000. And that's the number that a lot of places, and I'm not talking crazy American politics places. I'm talking Europe, Germany, JAMA, the Journal of American Medical Association, have set that threshold as a place where it's safe to do things like open schools, substantially open restaurants and those kinds of things. And we are at that level. We are at these very, very excellent levels right now. The other number I look at all the time is the number of positive cases at any point in time, because those are obviously the number of people walking around who could infect somebody. And Penobscot County is about 1 in 7,000. 1 in 7,000 people in Penobscot County is actually sick at the moment with COVID, or at least tested sick. There's who knows how many people haven't tested but are asymptomatic. But the number we can measure is the people who are symptomatic, who are tested, and that's about 1 in 7,000. And there's a huge difference. 1 in 7,000, we were more than 95% sure that nobody I've done some little probability models, more than 95% sure nobody in the schools has COVID, 1,000 people in our buildings, staff and students. By the time you get to 1 in 1,000, we're more likely than not to have somebody sick in our schools on any given day, and very likely to have multiple people sick in our schools every day. So, that scale, that difference between 1 in 6,000, 1 in 7,000, obviously we'd be great if it was 1 in 50,000, but that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. We're at the good end of that scale where there's good, mathematical modeling reasons to think for a school of this size, district of this size, we're pretty, we're not bringing it into the schools on a regular basis. As we slip down, that's the whole conversation. So I think it's really hard to get past the fact that the numbers are great. Could they change? Yes. Will they change? Probably. But right now they're great. And I think, kids are hurting, parents are hurting. So I think it's a good time. It's the best time to do what we can to get kids in schools as much as we can from a very objective mathematical point of view. As far as the lanes, I totally agree with the notion that we're going to have to move across lanes, and I think the lanes are a very helpful point of view. But I have two objections to the lanes. Objection number one is that the lanes are guidance for districts and local needs for safety, are supposed to be considered into that. So I don't read the lanes as if we're green, we have to open 100%. What I actually read green as is we should open as much as we can within the limits of being safe. And the other thing I think that the lanes does is it gets us into this very limited, there's only 3 choices: hybrid, remote, or full. And I think there's a lot of shades of color. I'm not very good at my colors, so I don't know what color is a little bit green from yellow. But if we're honest, that's where we're at right now. We have several grades that are back full. So we're not in a true hybrid model. We're certainly not, very close to green because we have more grades that are hybrid than not. But I think it's really important to think about these lanes. I don't know if there's dozens or hundreds of lanes. So I think that's a really important thing to think about. So those are some of the things I'm thinking about. I don't think that the endpoint is necessarily 100% return. The endpoint to me is as much return as we can get to while maintaining all of the safety standards and guidelines. And I think we're still learning and scoping exactly what that is. It's more than what we have today. Maybe it's 100% of the students, but when you start to think about lunch times and transition times and school buses and other things, it may not be 100% either. But I think an incremental step right now is the right thing to do. I think it meets kids' educational needs while fully ensuring that we're keeping things safe under, the belt and suspenders. The community numbers are extremely low right now. And and we're doing all the safety protocols. And as Meredith said, and I commend her for this, and I think it's exactly the right place to be, we're on the conservative side of these safety protocols. So open up 3rd grade and 7th grade makes sense to me. That those grades are already having half the kids in the building, so it's really only half a grade in each of those schools. I'm looking forward to hearing more about the high school. I do think high school is much more complex. I also think high school students are much more capable of remote learning than 3rd graders or 2nd graders or 1st graders. So I don't think that there has to be an exact equivalency across schools either. I could see us ending up in a model where, maybe if several more steps go down the road of incremental growth over 2 or 3 more time periods and conversations and the numbers staying good, we're full back at OMS and ASA, and we're not full back at high school. So I think the grade differences are important too. So I support incremental change. I think the currently proposed change makes sense. I can imagine if things continue to go well, and the going well is about learning new things about how to run the school, and we can keep safety fully strong, then that makes sense. As far as the distance, 6 feet is a whole lot better than 3 feet, but it's not like there's a black and white line. 6 feet is not 10 times better than 5 feet. So I get very uncomfortable at 3 feet, 3.5 feet, 4 feet. Honestly, I get pretty uncomfortable about 4.5 feet, but 5 feet versus 6 feet, that's something. As long as we're doing all the other things we need to be doing about hand washing and masks and ventilation, that to me seems like the kind of line or conversation we can have. But so to me, pushing forward, stopping at the point when we feel like we're not maintaining safety measures is the right thing, and doing it incrementally is also the right thing. So, again, 3rd grade and 7th grade makes sense to me. I totally see and support the idea that teachers need time. I guess kind of like Aaron, I wonder if an early release once a month is enough. I don't want to put words in administrators' mouths, but I wonder if a day a month, those Wednesdays, parents are already used to accommodating students. And I wonder if our students wouldn't get a better education if they gave 1 day a month to giving the teachers some more time to be adaptive and responsive. So I want, I want the recommendation to come from the administrators, but I do think it's a very real problem, both just the fatigue and also the need for time to think about innovating. And I think there are ways to make that possible, and we should make that possible. So those are my thoughts.
I really have nothing to add to that other than I am fully supportive of the plan as you laid it out. The kind of vision I always had for this was pending, how the pandemic's going, we slowly continue to bring grades back as we can. So, I picture it as, baby steps. We have a base of what we've done so far. Things have gone well, fortunately, and it makes, the most sense to add back 1 grade at each school and then do that for a while, reassess and see how that goes. So I'm fully supportive of the plan as you have outlined it. I'm fully supportive of continuing to use masks and social distancing in the schools, and I'm also supportive of the additional staff time. Although, like Brian, I do wonder if it is enough. I know that even pre-COVID, and I'm not suggesting this, but even pre-COVID, the Belfast school system every Friday has an early release day for professional development, and they've had that for a couple of years now. And I'm sensitive to the extra load on the teachers and what they need, and would be supportive of something that can make that happen for them.
Yeah, and I don't have a whole lot to add there, but on the I presumably you guys are going to figure out what's best. I was wondering about. I think Wednesday is the natural spot for giving professional time personally, just because it's it's already sort of set up that way. And if it turns out, whether it's every week, every other week, that it's a half a day or something like that, I would imagine, and again, don't know anything, but the 1 day a week trying to cram it all in versus, like you said, I think they're like under the water. They're just paddling, trying to stay afloat right now. So I would assume on a weekly basis that would be a welcomed, or bi-weekly if we had to do that. But I guess we meet. Have requirements been changed from the state on number of days this year? Has that been flexible? Made flexible?
Yes, there's a waiver that goes through either January 15th or January 31st. It's kind of complex how they've set it up. So it's under the state of emergency that was created back in when the legislature was still in session. They waived the minimum number of days. So you can waive things through, January and not have to satisfy them on the other side of January at the end of the year. And we've been told that there will, likely be a revisiting of that once the legislature returns to session. So, there's a real flexibility is the kind of shorter answer of that.
Well, I mean, I totally support doing whatever you guys come to. I'll know when you come back, but I have no doubts that they need all the time they can. I would like, and I don't know if this would be the case for if I totally support coming back incrementally, like you said. I think 16 people to a building is I think that's good. Thinking about the high school, clearly you're thinking about the same things, but seniors would obviously have the least amount of impact with senior priv, and they're just the smallest class we have. So, but freshmen for the other reasons, wherever that ends up. I think if transition is the big thing and the big concern, presumably senior class accomplishes that a little better, or makes accommodations there a little better. So, for the third grade, I assume that would allow for those third grade teachers who would be going full time to not be doing remote as well. So that might be an advantage for them for doing that. Being the class that gets chosen, I guess.
Yeah, their ed tech is
not.
doing the remote. They're involved though to support the work of the ed tech's work with kiddos. So, yeah, Kristen, that wouldn't change probably, would it?
Yeah, they work great as a team together. It would lessen the load for the staff as far as they would not have the hybrid piece to be planning for. So that would be great. But they would continue to do some support with the ed tech to make sure that everybody's on the same page, whether you're remote or you're in person.
Gotcha. Yep. All right. Great. I think that's it. And I do think I keep bringing up the numbers of cases and hospitalizations, because I think it is it's okay to point out, I think, successes, and it's not necessarily our success, it's our region's success. I think it's okay to point that out and not celebrate it, but be grateful for it, and with the full understanding it could change right now. We could leave tonight and it's completely changed. So I don't think there's any harm to acknowledging where we're at and the good fortune, I guess, that we've had. So that's all I've got.
If I could I just add a piece in response to what Kristen was saying about the implications of this for third grade teachers? I think it bears mentioning that the social distancing requirements to which we are required to adhere have impacted instruction in a way that it is made many of the normal routines for teachers who do have their students fully in person inaccessible. And so the burden is, persists really across all grade levels, because of different circumstances.
I wanted to sort of say on that I think I don't know how I feel about adding more classes back yet, but I think if we do, it would be really great if we could provide those teachers who are getting added, like, have an extra day off before they come back so that they can prep and plan for that, because there are going to be, different things that they're having to deal with, changing over to having full in class again.
I guess just a couple of other things for me on where I sit on this. First of all, I think Meredith and her team have obviously done a good job identifying the pressure points that we're going to have to deal with transportation and transitions, lunch. Those are going to be the kind of things that we're going to have to figure out if we want to bring additional students into the building. Second, I certainly support the proposal of bringing back the third grade and the seventh grade. I think at the high school, I guess my preference, and I think this kind of goes along with what Leo was saying, was given the size of the senior class along with senior priv, and also, quite frankly, what I would see is the increased likelihood that seniors are going to follow the guidelines as opposed to freshmen. I'd rather start with the senior class. That gives us a little, maybe a smaller first step, but I think freshman is the other option there, obviously. So you've identified them. I would say that it does seem to me that the high school is certainly lagging behind the other two schools in terms of getting students back in full time. So they need to do something there. So I think the time for kind of decision making and consideration, I get that, but that something needs to be decided on that. I guess one thing that I would point out that really we haven't talked about yet that I can remember at any point when we've been discussing these, kind of our plan for the year is, as Brian pointed out, it's quite possible that we could go through the entire 2021 academic year without fully reopening, right? That we would not be able to bring everybody back who wanted to come back full time. I hope that's not true, but it could very well be true. If that's the case, then I think we start to run into some pretty serious equity concerns around if some students getting some grade levels getting full time all year or 6 months or 2/3 of the year, whatever it is, where other students don't get any full time at all. And I think we need to start in it as we're planning our steps going forward. I think one thing I'd like to add in there is we've got these natural break points, right? The quarters. And again, it doesn't mean anything at ASA, but it does at the middle school and the high school. And, let's say we start to approach the end of quarter 2 and we've had 7th grade come in, but numbers haven't changed much and we're not thinking we're going to get to add the 8th grade in. Do we then start to think about a situation where, well, maybe the 7th and the 8th grade flip or the 6th grade takes a shot at being hybrid so that we can get 8th graders in. I think it's the same thing for grades at ASA 4 and 5. And I would say whatever we do at the high school, the grades that aren't brought in, I hope that we can get them all in. But if we can't, then I do think we start to run into some serious equity issues, and we need to look at how we're going to try and make it as equitable as possible. I fully get the advantage of having and the reason for having pre-K through 2, be the first group that we put in, right? And I'm willing to, given the importance of that, I'm willing to sacrifice a little bit of equity. Or maybe a lot of equity. I'm less willing to do that at the middle school and the high school because I don't think there's that big of a difference between the 6th grade and the 7th grade and the 8th grade, particularly once 6th grade gets in and gets their feet wet, right? They've transitioned, they're in the building, they're in the routine. It's not, I don't think it's the same thing. So I think that's something for me that I'm going to want to push pretty hard on, that we add into our planning going forward, and hoping that we don't have to use it, that we can just kind of keep progressing and everybody comes in. But we also need to recognize that that might not happen. And what I don't want to see, and what I wouldn't be supportive of, is we've got grade levels of kids that go the entire year without getting the opportunity to be in school 4 or 5 days a week, whatever we're going to define as a full-time day, whereas other grades are getting that opportunity. That I don't think that's fair, and so I don't want to see that addressed.
This is more just a comment for parents listening. I think the thought is, even if whatever it is, 7th grade or 3rd grade goes to full, the remote learning option still remains an option. And I don't know whether hybrid would remain an option for some of those kids if they wanted. Like I said, a lot of the benefit in terms of safety may have gone away with hybrid, but some families might still, for schedule reasons, prefer hybrid. But I don't know if that's something we can continue to offer to those grades or not. Muted.
As I said, kind of when I was saying the beginning part of next steps, there are so many possibilities, and what you laid out, Mark, is one of the possibilities that some of us were just talking through today, that, part of the phasing could mean this kind of grade level or certain groups rotate through an opportunity to have full-time enrollment, maybe not, concurrently with the rest of the school, but that might be part of the plan. Because I agree with you that I think it's important that is an element that everyone has that opportunity this year, if the conditions remain such that we can continue to do that. And I don't foresee us being able to have just one option available at any point this year. I don't foresee this year for us to be able to discontinue remote as an offering. I cannot say that we would continue 3 lanes at once, kind of like Bangor, I think, is doing that, where they have, you can choose A, B, or C. I don't think that aligns with how we're doing this. And I think it maybe works better at some places than others in terms of how it's, how the synchronous element is working. So that's a part of the discussion that we have to have about phasing. But, hearing your feedback has been helpful tonight. And, it sounds like you're supportive of the general direction we've laid out, and we have some work to do to kind of formalize, especially around high school, what we plan to do there. And we'll bring that back to you next meeting.
Can I ask a high school question? Not having a lot of experience with the high school, I know they have 4 blocks right now, right? Which is down from 6 blocks, right? Down from 8, right? So, go ahead, Reg, I'm sorry.
No, so yeah, down from 8 blocks. But.
So is there a possibility for us to have, if they have, say, 5 minutes to change classes, what if we do 10, but only release half at a time? So you're not having as much congestion in the halls that way, given that we have trimmed down the blocks. I assume those 4 blocks are much longer than the 8 would have been. So, can we do something like that?
So the blocks aren't a lot longer. They're somewhat longer because we've eliminated the Muse block, but the students only had 4 blocks a day before. They were just seeing them every other day. We've talked about that, but one of the challenges at the high school is the fact that students don't travel, in grade level groups from class to class. So, and if you're releasing one into the building, they might be lined up at another teacher's class that doesn't release until the next 5-minute wave. And so now you have a problem in the hallway. So it's just not as easy a problem to solve as it is at the other levels, where you can stagger things and it maybe doesn't impact it's not as clean at the high school because of mixed classes. You know, virtually all of the electives are mixed classes. And, you know, the whole English department after, you know, halfway through 10th grade year is all electives. And so, you know, it's a large set of courses that we have, kind of the mixed grade level groupings. And so figuring out how to stagger, you know, a passing time is kind of some problem solving that we have to engage in if we think that's a potential solution.
It's like one of those 15 puzzles, right? Every student has to have a place to be at every point in time. And so, yeah, and the worst thing is to have them all queuing up outside a teacher's door. So, yeah, high school is different for a number of reasons. I didn't mention health reasons too, but I don't think we know that much, except that kids can pass on COVID. But I think there's some evidence suggesting teenagers are much more likely to pass it on to other people than younger kids. So there's a health reason why I think the high school might be a little different too. Just a lot of complexities at the high school. But yes, I think you have, sounds like you have pretty broad support, and we'll look forward to, you know, having a more specific plan and making that concrete to go forward next board meeting 2 weeks from now. And sounds like there's pretty enthusiastic support about doing whatever the administration thinks to get teachers some more time too. All right.
That's really great. Thank you. I know that will be met with enthusiastic happiness. So we'll talk about that, and I guess bring a final plan for that to the next meeting that gets us through, you know, we'll talk about what that plan looks like at the admin team and bring you a recommendation. But it sounds like that you're advocating that more support would be okay, and I think it would be meeting needs better if it's more than one early release day a month. So we'll look at that.
We ready to move on to the bond investment update?
Yes, sorry, I was trying to find that in my stack of papers here. So you may recall that we had, you know, the big deposit into our accounts last fall of our bond funds, and then, you know, the work wasn't starting until, well, we had design documentation that we were paying for through the winter, but, you know, on a project of this time length, you have a long time that you're waiting to expend, you know, the majority of your funds. And so we passed a policy about investments, and we invested into 2 CDs that Bangor Savings worked with us on, you know, ensuring they met the FDIC kind of thresholds for being protected. And so you can see that, you know, we invested in a 26-week CD that matured on May 14th, and you see the interest rate for that. And then we invested $4,145,000 in that one. And then the 52-week CD matures November 12th, and we invested $5 million in that one. So the rates for those, you can see there, Brian and I were looking at this earlier, and at the time we thought those were kind of low rates, but, you know, we saw, well, we'll make something off the money more than what's in the account. But with what's happened in the financial kind of, you know, sector, those rates are looking really good now. So we're really glad that we made those investments back then. So you can see our projected interest, and then the actual interest we've earned, and then what we're projected to finish up with in the 52-week. The projected interest on the 26-week was my misunderstanding of how this works. So the interest earned was actually what you see there, and that is a correct number. It's that's an annualized interest rate. So we earned, you know, half a year's worth of interest on that annualized rate. So that's the 26,000 you see there. So the total interest we're earning on these CDs is 101,738. And then the rest of our money all along has been in what's called an ICS account, which, you know, continually is earning interest over time, but it's a variable rate. And so the rate then wasn't bad. And that's why we thought these CDs weren't a great, you know, gain, but we thought, you know, let's put them there because we have some guaranteed earnings. Well, it turns out that, you know, the ICS was at 1.15 back when we made these decisions, and now it's at 0.15 interest. So it's really been impacted by, you know, the financial kind of crisis that the pandemic is causing. But nonetheless, we've earned in our ICS, just regular bank account, we've earned already, well, we earned $9,400 through April, and then in May we put in when the other CD matured, it went in the bank account, and so we began earning on a higher rate, but it was at a lower interest rate. So you can see kind of the total interest projection that we'll earn through next month. It looks to be around $125,000. The red highlighted number there. $125,409. So what we talked about, you know, we need to report this to you. It's part of our policy. We'll bring you an update. But, you know, and we theoretically could turn it around and reinvest in a 6-month CD in looking at our liquidity needs with the bond. But it's really not a good choice right now because the CDs now are at 0.15, which is what we're earning in our ICS account. So it's not the right time to invest in a CD. If things rebound and we look at our timeline for expenditures, we might consider that, but I'm just not sure it's going to work time-wise. I think our best hope is that the interest rate in our, you know, bank account rebounds some and gets back up to maybe where it was ultimately, or closer to it than it is now. So, you know, overall we earned, you know, a good amount of funds that go toward our capital improvement. Kind of that's money that we were going to put toward some of our capital improvement needs we weren't able to include in the bond. So that can help us do our list of projects once the project is done that we kind of have on our wish list. So do you have any questions about this?
I was curious if there was any, because I assume when we actually got the bond or when they sold the bond, that our rate, what was our rate? Was it 3 or 2 or something like that?
We had 2 sales, but it was between 2 and 3 in both cases.
Was it? And has that bottom dropped out? And could we go back to that, or are there some kind of requirements that you can in the first 5 years or something?
To refinance, yeah.
Yeah.
I think they both have a 10-year hold before you can refinance. In addition, one of the bonds we just sold a month ago, and so you know, that's just the gap between a CD, which is guaranteed, and a bond, which has some risks. So I forget what the rate was. I think it was 2.25 or something, but that's the current market. That's as low as it's going to go.
That is, oh, it is.
Yeah,
okay.
we're just more risky than a CD, which is federally insured.
Okay.
So we're not.
I know that the town just did some of that. I saw, so I was curious if we could accomplish something similar to what they've done.
No, I mean, number one, we have to hold that first sale for 10 years, but we really didn't pay a whole lot more than we just paid, which is the lowest rate we're going to get. So.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks.
Some of it, talking to the bond rating person, Standard & Poor's, is that this law in Maine where you can only hold on to 3% of your revenue, 3% of the money to carry over for next year, which we always hold a little more than 3%. But, you know, they just looked at our cash position relative to other school districts across the country. And they were like, you know, you guys are the best in Maine, but you're still pretty low compared to other school districts across the country. So that didn't make a huge difference in our rate, but we didn't get the very tippy top rate either because of that law.
So we'll continue with the ICS account and, you know, hope that the interest rates rebound a bit. But if they don't, you know, we have $125,000 more that we've earned on these CDs. So I'm grateful that we have that.
Definitely worth having done.
Yeah.
And I just looked, the only other thing we can invest in besides CDs are T-bills, treasury bonds, and they're even lower. They're at 0.09%. So for a short-term T-bill. So yeah, there's really, the difference between the CD and the ICS is not very high. So there's really nothing I think we gain by putting it anywhere else. We have maximum flexibility and we leave almost no money on the table.
So I think we're ready to move to the next item.
All right, on to action items. So we have a co-curricular, some co-curricular stipend appointments. So I would make a motion to approve the co-curricular slate as presented. Is there a second?
I second.
And it's short enough I can read it tonight. I'm just trying to find it.
I already have a question about it though. Should I wait for you to read it?
Yeah, let me just read it. I just found it. So we have OMS Assistant Cross Country, Karen Fry, OMS Drama, Rachel Sear. We have 4 teacher mentors. So there's a formal mentorship program for new teachers with Suzanne Neville, Laura Cavazos, Emily Jackson Sanborn, and Shauna Goodall. And we have a technology lead at each of the schools. At OMS, it's Deb Bishop, 75%, Emily Jackson Sanborn, 25%. At ACE, it's Brad Martin. And at OHS, it's Shauna. So that's the slate that's on the table. Aaron, so we're into discussion. You had a question, Aaron?
Yeah, isn't Deb not there this year, Deb Bishop? So is she still the tech lead for this
Yeah,
year?
she's still performing some roles for us in her. Sometimes she's on site and sometimes she's performing them remotely.
Oh,
She's
okay.
also advising a club.
That was it.
Any other questions or comments? We can go ahead and vote. Aaron?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Leo?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Next up, we have a food service delivery driver. Meredith, do you want to introduce that?
Yeah, so what Ben and I have talked about is hiring a temporary part-time food service employee who will primarily do driving, but also maybe, just some preparation to package and get things ready to go out the door. We're looking at 3 hours a day, 3 days a week through December, because that's when we have these funds, the CRF2. It'll be a nice trial for us to see how this works. And we can evaluate if we think it's something that we want to continue past that with district funds, or if there's another funding source for relief package. So the total for that will all be paid by CRF, but it's just over $3,000. And if anyone out there is listening and is interested in a middle of the day part-time job, look for an advertisement.
And would this be door to door or would this be certain stop points?
We anticipate it can probably be door to door.
Great. So I would make a motion to authorize advertising and hiring. We don't need to approve the hire. Authorize advertising and hiring for a food service delivery driver through December 30th, paid for from CRF funds. Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion or questions? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. Aaron?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Leo?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Next up is the delegate to the Maine School Board Association Assembly. I think you all know what this is. So we're members of the Maine School Board Association, which jointly with the Maine Superintendent's Association is the usually your MESMA, Maine School Management Association, but there's a separate branch for the school board. One of the main things that they do is they have a policy committee, not the kinds of policies we normally work with, but they recommend bills to the legislature, and each January they sit down with each January of the start of a biennial legislative session, they sit down with the education committee and advocate for things. They then later bring that back to us when there's bills that will help or hurt the schools and ask board members to advocate. So the committee's met. They've got 4 things that they have proposed. I'll mention those briefly and we can talk about them in more detail next week. But we have to send, well, we can send a delegate to the delegate assembly. It's a formal Robert's Rules of Order assembly of a representative from potentially every school board in the state. I think I've done that the last 2 times. It's on the Friday before Halloween, the afternoon of Friday the 30th. We can name a delegate and an alternate. I'm more than happy if somebody else wants to go, to let somebody else go. But if not, I'm happy to go too.
I wouldn't mind going.
You want to do it?
Yeah.
Okay. So anybody else want to be an alternate? Okay, so I would make a motion to nominate Leo as the delegate and Brian as the alternate for the MESPA School Assembly in October. Is there a second?
I second.
Is there any discussion?
Just thanks to you both for being willing to do it.
And Leo, I don't know if you got the email if you're on the MESPA Association, but they've identified 4 things. I'll just briefly recap them now. But traditionally, what we've done is we've discussed them as a board and sent you off with recommendations. But we empower you to act in your best judgment because things get amended and change through time too. Last time they had something that was really CTE. It was really biased towards Southern Maine large CTEs and really hurting the Bangor one. And I motioned to amend it and it flipped the whole thing into a positive thing for. So, you know, it's the whole process. So we can do that. The ones that are on the table this year, 3 of them are what I would call motherhood and apple pie, meaning they're certainly important things, but there's no specific legislative ask. There's no specific implementation. So one of them is on long distance learning and building more permanent infrastructure at the state DOE around long distance learning, recognizing that it obviously is a crisis management tool during COVID, but it has potentials for equity and things like that. One of them is increasing the role of families in education. One of them is equity in schools. And then the last one is more concrete. It's asking the state to basically lock in permanently, once we get out of emergency powers on COVID, the ability to have remote attendance of board members at school board meetings. So those, right now we're doing this under an emergency proclamation from the governor. Once that expires, we would go back to the original state where the only people who can vote are people who are physically in the meeting room, but some version. This has been kicked around for 10 years at the legislature and never quite acted on. So that's the last proposition. So those are the 4 that they're going to be discussing. So we'll discuss those as a board. We'll send out a copy and discuss those 4 as a board next meeting.
But in the meeting
It's remote. It's all virtual.
Oh, it's remote. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh.
Normally it's in Augusta. You get to go to the great town of Augusta. You're already backing out, aren't you?
No. I assumed it was. I wasn't even thinking about it being remote, to be honest. But
yeah,
that's fine. I know several of the education committee folks as well, so I think that's not that I'll be the one sitting with them, but
I mean, it is actually fun to go if the conference were being held physically in Augusta.
Mm-hmm.
I will attend the rest of the conference because there's all kind. Drummond and Woodson shows up and gives a lot of free legal advice, these things. So I'll put the pitch out. I put it out every year, so I wasn't repeating it. But you are all eligible to go to the delegates conference, which is that Friday and Saturday, and there's dozens and dozens of remote sessions on school security policies, a session where you get to meet with the head of the DOE and ask questions. There's all kinds of sessions. It's definitely worthwhile. And it is fun to go in person and meet other school board members too.
You say Friday and Saturday? I thought before you said it's the Friday before Halloween.
I believe, I'd have to double check the schedule.
Yeah.
I believe
I think it's Thursday, Friday, isn't it?
I'm pretty sure the delegate session is Friday afternoon. I'd have to check whether the conference itself is the Thursday, Friday before Halloween or the Friday, Saturday. I think it might have switched to, it's normally Thursday, Friday, but I think it might have switched to Friday, Saturday under remote. We'd have to confirm.
Okay, but on that note, I don't think I get those emails for some reason. If they're sending emails, I haven't seen them.
Do you get emails? Yeah, so we'll have to check.
Mm-hmm.
We'll
For a
have to-
while,
But-
my
yeah.
email was wrong
Right,
on the
maybe
website.
maybe that's
That's-
our, but it is Friday, Saturday, I just found. I
Yeah.
need to get that on my calendar. And so when we register, you will make sure your address is correct. So, and verify that with them.
Yeah.
So I'll send information for registration out to Brian and Leo. If anyone else is interested, just let me know and we'll get you registered. I think I'll have to look and see if I have something with the topics, but they're always, very timely.
Maybe something about COVID. Who knows?
We might hear that mentioned.
Perhaps.
Okay. Service learning requirement adjustment for class of 2021. You want to do that, Meredith? Or
Yes, so the last spring we brought a recommendation to you and you supported waiving that requirement for students given the challenges that students were facing as they were trying to finish up that requirement with the community service element. We're bringing that same request to you for our seniors this year. It's just something we feel like we should waive this year, and certainly students who've completed it will value that and they'll get that credit, but to waive it for students who have not been able to complete that. And this request came from the high school.
so I would make a motion to waive the requirement in, I believe it's policy IKJ on graduation, or is it IKE, IKJ?
It's
I think?
IKF.
IKF, there we go. Policy IKF on graduation requirements for service learning for the high school class of 2021. Is there a second?
I second.
So I certainly support waiving it. It does strike me that we have an opportunity, though, in particular, the form of service of high school students tutoring / mentoring grade school students. And I'm just wondering if we're, kind of actively promoting that.
Are you thinking remotely or in person?
No, remotely, yeah. But, we have a lot of elementary kids who are home without a teacher, when they're in their hybrid or they're doing asynchronous work. And we have a lot of high school students who have a study period or something. So maybe that's a whole separate conversation. I don't want to hang up this debate, but I wonder if that's being looked at. Anything else on this particular waiver of the requirement for this year? All right, we'll go ahead and vote. Aaron?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Leo?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. So we're on to subcommittee reports. Policy subcommittee met last week, and we dove into a series of policies relating to sexual harassment because the Title IX federal regulations were changed, and so it required some very substantial changes. And honestly, the policies are pretty ugly at this point because there's a Maine state law and there's a federal law, and the two don't always agree. And Drummond and Woodsum has carefully crafted a policy about, well, in this case you look here, in that case you look there, and you follow different procedures. And the policies are now 15 pages long, which is, I think, kind of unfortunate given how important the topic is, but that's what the laws are right now. So we got close to going through those. We'll finish going through that at the next policy committee meeting in early November. And we have a number of other policies that have one-word changes due to various state laws that have changed in the past year. So we'll see how many of those we get through, and we'll probably be bringing you a large chunk of policies for first reads, or if there's small changes for revisions at the board meeting in November. That's the policy subcommittee. UTC, Aaron?
We have a meeting coming up this week.
Okay. Spruce?
Yeah, we actually did have a emergency meeting last Thursday, and the only reason the meeting was to authorize some spending of their fund balance. The reason it was emergency was some of the work that needed to be done was weather reliant with the cold and frost coming, specifically some subsurface drainage work and some parking lot work that they want to get done before it gets colder.
Curriculum Subcommittee, I think we reported on last month. It's going to meet this Thursday.
One of the things on the agenda is what Meredith mentioned earlier, the technology goals that have been set by the technology committee. So that's going to be a point of discussion at that committee meeting.
Facilities and Building Committee, I'm not sure.
We've had stuff happening. Yeah,
Go ahead.
Brian mentioned the band sale that happened this past month. And we improved our position, actually. We had to have another rating for the ban, and we went from a S&P rating of 1 to 1+. So, you know, our financial position actually was rated a little stronger this round, and I think our bond advisor is really working hard to advocate for us in that regard. So we've really benefited, I think, from his expertise in that. We had our building committee meeting last week. Was it last week? Which that's the first time the committees met since we kind of started the project. And it was a lot of ground covered. We talked about kind of the cash flow and what the liquidity needs are going to be throughout the project. We're getting started with an ASA Interiors Committee, which is a really exciting development. So they're going to be working on, selecting some colors and finishes for some of the interiors work. And then, shortly after that, there'll be a middle school, high school committee formed for the same kind of work. Then there'll be a third team doing that on the auditorium. So it'll kind of happen in that order they've said. Those were the big highlights. Other than the obvious, what you see around you with work happening, things are going, really pretty well. Brian, Mark, you were at the meeting. Anything to add to that?
I mean, physically, except for the classrooms at the end of the high school wing, but the auditorium, the 2 cafeterias, and the ASA front entrance space, the footings, I think, are mostly laid. So, they did what they wanted to do, which is get those in before things got cold and there was a frost, and now they can start building up. So things are definitely progressing on all those fronts. Anything on the wellness subcommittee, Aaron?
No.
Okay. Any other business from a board member? Hearing none. Any requests for future agenda items? Okay, hearing none, we'll go to our second public comment period. Again, I would love to hear from everybody who wants to speak, as long as we can keep it focused. This certainly has been a long board meeting, but would love to hear from anybody who wants to speak. Anybody have public comment? Going. Gone. Okay, looks like there's no public comment. Our next board meeting will be 2 weeks from today, Tuesday, October 20th at 6 p.m. The same format as president, meaning board members may be here in the gym, but it'll be primarily through Zoom. Is there any, and just a reminder, we did move the next board meeting after that from, I think it's November 3rd to November 10th to miss election night. Any requests for information or follow-up? All right, seeing none, that concludes the public part of the board meeting. We have one executive session. We will not take any action except for adjournment after the executive session. I would make a motion to go into executive session under 1 MRSA 405-6D, labor negotiations. Is there a second?
A second.
Is there any conversation? We'll go ahead and take a vote. Aaron?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Leo?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. So if everybody else would, do we need any of the principals for this, Meredith? Do we need any principals? Okay, yep, everybody except for board members can go ahead and drop off. Thank you for coming.
Brian, I made you host, so hopefully that works, and I will stop recording, and I hope everybody has a fantastic night.
Thank you.